Hey there. We are still looking for responses for our After Dark kind of retrospective, anything goes kind of episodes that land between these kind of revisits. These were Patreon rewards for people who gave at the $10 and up level. We sent out a form that you should have gotten in your email, or you can find at patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv. If you're sitting on that and waiting to send in your response, please send it in. We would love to see so many more than we have already gotten. If we don't get those, we will just open it up and make it kind of free for all for everybody. But we want to make sure that you will get that and get your priority if you paid for it. So if you have backed us at the $10 level since October of 2016 or so, please check your email, check the spam box, or go to Patreon and look for that form. That is the preferred way to get those in to us. If you didn't get that and you think, hey, I should have that, please reach out to us. We can't hunt you down. We have no way of knowing if it got to you. But yeah, let us know. We want to make sure that we get those to you. I've rambled on long enough. Let us get into the first of our revisit episodes for this Victory Lap farewell season.
Some of our landings were desperate adventures. We are now prepared to meet the inevitable counterattacks with power and with confidence.
My name is Gary Butterfield.
My name is Kole Ross.
And I'm Stewart McGowan.
And you're listening to Bonfireside Chat. It is a reminiscing favorite? A hunter's favorite?
Yeah, an old favorite. It's an old favorite.
It's an old fave.
Yeah. And this week we are beginning our, let's say, Victory Lap season with Bloodborne Revisited. We're going back and just kind of talking about Bloodborne in general and its place in the series. And we are joined, as you heard, by Stewart. Hey, Stewart.
Hey.
Yeah. He is one of the people who have backed us at our highest possible tier. Incredibly generous Patreon backer. And I can tell from the short conversations we've had and from interacting with you online, because you've been a longtime listener as well, that you're a really solid, nice stand-up dude. So we're really happy to have you on.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah,
allow me to prove you very wrong.
That's always the, it's an illogical fear because this has never happened to us, but when we have people on who are unknown quantities, even if they're other people from podcasts, it's always just like, what if someone decided just to tank it? Like their whole point of them was, they're like, I'm just going to destroy this from the inside, and come on and start. And then maybe they don't realize that it's up to it. Like, we don't do this live. No. If you decided to tank it, we just like, we wouldn't put out that episode, man. Like it's okay. I trust you not to do that though.
Yeah.
So now's not the time to reveal that I'm here to crush all SJWs then.
Yeah, exactly. We can just we will re-edit your words and stuff, and you will be like Anita Sarkeesian Jr. by the end of that rant. and then we're leaking it to Sargon of Mesolithiles or whatever the YouTube, whatever Mesopotamian worshipping YouTube rational that So Stewart, tell us a little bit about kind of your history with the series and specifically why you chose Bloodborne for the revisit season.
Well, I had heard about Dark Souls briefly, but I actually got into it because a professor recommended it to me when I was in university. He had been doing a bunch of essays on the interconnected world of Dark Souls and how it uses space and interlocks with itself. I hit my wall in that pretty hard in Blight Town, like I think a lot of people do. But a friend helped me through it, and I've just been kind of hooked on the series since. And Bloodborne itself really speaks to me as a game. Like, I think that its themes are very, very strong. It might be really tense, but I love the gameplay, and I have just delved so deep into it in comparison to the others even.
Yeah, you had said you played this in the double digits.
Yeah, I think this was getting ready for this episode was my 12th or 13th time going through it. So
wow.
I spent some time with it.
Yeah, you got me beat.
Yeah, I'm at 4 on this bad boy. I have played Dark Souls 1 10 times at least. So I think that's the only one that I've got into the double digits, and then 2 close to that. But this one I'm on 4. I played 4 for this revisit. Which we'll talk about. Like, and I love Bloodborne. Like, it's not my the one that spoke to me out of all the whole series quite as strongly, but like I love it, and revisiting it has been really fun.
Yeah,
looking forward to talking to it. I'm glad that we have somebody also who is that passionate about it and knows it that well and has gone through it that many times.
Yeah, this last run through was actually kind of a crap show on my part.
Oh, no.
I don't know what happened, but I was just I was like, wow, has it been like several years since I've played this? And I was like, no, it's been like a month. But,
what had you played in the time between your last attempt?
Few games, Hollow Knight,
okay.
A lot. Torment, the new Torment game.
Yeah.
Some Overwatch here and there, but nothing that should have taken out my skills as strongly as it feels like it did.
Yeah. I had a rough time at about the midway point, because during my playthrough for the victory lap, that was when I was doing Neo play as well.
Oh, yeah.
And guess what? Your muscle memory will betray you going both directions. So not only was I trying to get back to Bloodborne from Dark Souls 3, but also dealing with Neo confusion.
I was trying to go back through all of the games in case I ended up on a different episode, and that had happened to me for Dark Souls 2, because I went to that and I am a wad of wet paper in that thing. I'm terrible at it.
Yeah.
There's
so
a lot.
bad.
There's a lot more avatar skill in Dark Souls 2.
Yeah.
Like, it's a lot like that.
The adaptability.
That adaptability stat means, your character starts out worse, regardless of how good the player is in that game. And you can really feel it. And I think that aspect is at its least in Bloodborne.
Right.
And that was also my first time going into Scholar of the First Sin. So
yeah.
trying to experience it, even the things I did remember were all wrong. So
yeah. Your memories will absolutely betray you.
Yeah.
With that. Which sounds more serious than it is. It's actually
it sounds in line with the themes of that game.
Yeah, yeah, it's actually good. I also ran into a real rough part at the middle. And it's because I think the middle of this game it gets a lot harder.
Yeah.
Which we'll talk about when we get into it. At least for me. So we're going to kind of, for people who are listening, this is the general format that the entire Victory Lap season is going to take. We're going to kind of talk about what this entry is, like what makes it unique in the series. Kind of give you the real high level. Everyone listening to this probably is familiar with Bloodborne to some degree. So we're going to give you a real high level kind of overview, and then kind of just talk about what we think works, what the kind of philosophy was it, what didn't work, kind of, and then do some kind of what Kole calls soulsagories, which is like kind of a portmanteau of souls and categories.
No, it's not. I literally just typed that out because I didn't want to just write the categories. So yeah,
it's I was trying to. I mean, good on you, because I was trying to think of something. Like, I was trying to think of a stronger portmanteau and I couldn't.
Yeah. And
it just, it's like, because it seems like it should make sense, because categories, that also begins with an S, but
yep.
It just somehow doesn't work. But our soulsagories, look for that on a t-shirt in 2017. Yes. Is us doing kind of best and worsts. Things that are super great, like these could be moments, areas, bosses, music, things like that, and then things that are kind of bummers. That's what it is. We're not going to go through every area. We're not going to, it's not going to be a fast forwarded version of the season.
We are taking a very high level view of this.
So So Bloodborne, for people, just kind of base demographics, was released in March of 2015 for the PS4 only. And even though this was exclusive, it was hugely successful.
Yeah. It was like the most successful or the best-selling new IP of that year, I believe. Which is not as prestigious as you would think, because there was almost no new IP in 2015.
Yeah, so, I was trying to think of one to make a joke even. Just I think you're Battleborn.
We were getting a lot of threes that year, weren't we?
Yeah, I believe so. So here's the thing: time is meaningless. 2015 feels like it was just yesterday. Like, I can't even believe that this game is 2 years old. But here we are.
Yeah, more than 2 years old. It's super weird. Yeah, and this remains I think a really good reason to own a PS4.
Oh yeah.
In kind of a almost post-exclusive society, like where almost everything's cross-platform. System wars are tedious. Everyone should own at least one of the either an Xbox, a PlayStation, a computer. It doesn't really matter which one, and whatever Nintendo has, because that's where you'll actually get weird exclusives.
Yeah.
But which one you choose only matters a little bit. But I think this is a really strong push for PS4, because as far as exclusives go, like this might be this and Demon Souls, like other than Nintendo aside, like these might be the strongest exclusive titles that I can think of.
Yeah.
This is why I bought a PS4.
Same.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
And then like there are bonuses. It's like, I got to play Journey. Like there are things that like you get to do on top of it, but like, man, a good reason to own a PS4.
I think my PS4 came bundled with Destiny, and I didn't touch it for like a year.
Yeah,
sounds about right.
Yeah. I've even heard like even people who really like Destiny say that it only really got good with the expansion.
Right.
Oh, okay.
If I recall but it's it's no Bloodborne. So it's if you're listening to this and you're trying to decide, PS4, if Bloodborne's very good.
If you're still on the fence, yeah. It actually kind of makes me a little bit sad that both this and Demon Souls will necessarily have the smaller audience compared to the rest of the series as a whole. Like mainline Dark Souls series are across pretty much every platform now, but these are going to be tucked away, and there are going to be people, we still hear from them saying, hey, I never got to Bloodborne because I just don't have the hardware. I couldn't invest the $200, $300, $400 to get into that. And like, that is a shame. And I'm probably going to make a similar point in the Demon Souls episode, because that's even further lost to time. Like, who can plug in a PS3? But it's still in effect here.
Here's the thing: is the Demon Souls version, the effect is lesser because we're probably a year and a half or 2 years out from like pretty good PS3 emulation. Like there already are emulators for it. It just they run at like 4 frames per second.
Right. Yeah.
But it's once you get the actual problem of doing it solved, like it will get faster and better.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually, PCs will be able to emulate PS3s, and everyone who has a decent PC will be able to play, which isn't, a huge slice either, but it's another piece of the pie,
Right.
So eventually, once these things become retro, they'll become democratized.
Yeah.
Which will be really good. But obviously, like, it will never happen, but it'd be very cool if this was available.
Yeah.
Kind of cross-platform.
Yeah, because this was published by Sony. Like, that is a different thing. This is not a Namco joint.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Demon Souls is exclusive for a very similar reason as well, because it was published by Atlas, but also kind of co-published by Sony. So Sony, they saw the value in this series and in locking it down, at least to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in this game, just again, for anybody who like the very base level, and because, as you mentioned, that's a good point, Kole, like there are people who just literally haven't played it.
Mm-hmm.
So this is you're a hunter. You have this sickness that is kind of a mystery to you, and you arrive in this nightmare of a city called Yarnum during what's known as the nightly hunt, or as the hunt, seeking out something called pale blood. And there's not a lot of context for these things when you start out, but that's part of the charm.
Yeah.
You start out with without knowing a full picture of what's going on.
Yeah.
And you're kind of dumped in there.
Because I would say more so than other entries in the series, Bloodborne is a mystery. And like a lot of the delight that I had was in those moments of reveal, was in actually figuring out what was at the core of this.
Yeah, and it's a mystery on multiple levels, because it's a mystery down to the specifics of finding out what those things are, and then there is the greater tonal reveal that happens about partway through the game, mm-hmm. which is when things go from spooky haunted house werewolves to absolute cosmic monstrosity, which is one of the best things the series has ever done.
Yep.
Like
I don't remember that being in any of the previews or anything, right?
They hit it pretty well.
Yeah. was a big surprise and a super good one.
Yeah.
When I've gone back and looked at trailers, I haven't gone back and looked at a trailer specifically looking for like maybe they show a Breedus for a second or something like that. But I don't remember seeing anything about it or hearing anything about it. Even down to the code name, which was, Beast Souls or Beast Blood, Beast. Was it Beast Soul? Project Beast?
I think it was
Project
Beast Souls.
Yeah, Project Beast. Yeah.
Beast Souls was the fun. I think it was Project Beast. Yeah. But even that was not, it wasn't Project Tentacle or whatever.
Yeah.
So like, and we'll get into it. Like, I have problems with what kind of the gameplay does around that point. Mm-hmm. But this game does this like a really amazing crossfade where like, as it gets kind of dips into some things I find a little bit like lesser than as far as like enemy design or level design, the plot just like kicks into overdrive and just gets so compelling and good and just full of weird mysteries that like it really draws you forward.
Yeah. It's like they had a finite point of competence or a finite amount of competence that they had to reallocate in terms of design. Almost. Yeah. I mean, it's still a fun game throughout, but there definitely are problems that are introduced around the time, the bolts start cutting loose. Right.
And even those problems, like even if it just like, it just kind of becomes less exceptional. Part of that is like to frame that in a more positive sense.
Yeah.
It's more that the beginning of it is so phenomenal.
Yeah.
Play wise, like level design wise and play wise, the first half of the game, even though in the season we kind of complained about getting sick of just like seeing the same kind of palette set, like, you're just in parts of the city. Mm-hmm. Like that section of the game, kind of even just wireframe level design wise is a triumph.
Yeah.
Like Yharnam is so good.
Yep.
It is so good. And then like you compare it to later areas and it's like those later areas, when I look back on them fondly, it's because of the thematic things or the plot reveals.
Yeah.
Or some of the visual design stuff. It's not that kind of wireframe. It's not that sense of place, things like that. Like my friend Will, I'm cribbing a point from him, but he's correct. And Bonfireside Chat alum, is that this is the only time From has ever made a place like a city feel like a city. Mm-hmm. Like Yharnam feels like a place where people live and could have lived and do live. And like everyone's locked up, they don't show and die.
And they die a lot.
People just die, like and aren't buried, and but it has that sense of place that like I feel like has only ever been really approached in like the hovels in Valley of Defilement or something like that.
Yeah.
Where this looks like a place people used, and that's really important to me.
Yeah.
Like having something seem like seem that way, seem real.
Yeah. Central Yharnam is a triumph. Even in looking at the broader scope of the series, I think that's about as good as some of the area design gets in the series. Yeah. Something about that reveal, since we're talking about this and going back through and playing it. So the majority of the time that I've spent with the game was actually before, a number of the patches came out, right? Like in my head, the canonical version of this game is with the long load times that just showed the Bloodborne logo with the memory leak, right? And so anything that contradicts that ends up sticking out like a sore thumb. When they replaced the loading screen, which was just the Bloodborne logo, with a more Souls-like kind of device, which was showing you item descriptions, that I think that was generally considered to be a pretty good thing because, hey, that's a way to make death sting less. Is hey, you get another bit of lore, right? However, there was no kind of rationing of those item descriptions based on that split of, hey, this is a spooky werewolf game, and this is Lovecraft as fuck. Yeah. So like somebody who goes and plays this now will get some kind of spoiler through those loading screens about the old ones, about the the shells and the kind of alien presence that you see throughout the back half of this game.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, and that's the fact that the game is different out of the box than it was now when you're revisiting it is actually going to be true for Dark Souls 2, very much so.
Yes,
and even Dark Souls to an extent. Mm-hmm. Is that there's the version we played the first time around just doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And it's true of Dark Souls 3 as well. And we talk about this a lot on the network. Like that is a strength to games that you can update these things. And I don't miss those like 45-second, minute-long load times.
No, God, no.
The first time through Bloodborne, that was my primary motivator not to die. Like I was playing this game more risk averse than I ordinarily would. Like jettisoning that, one of my favorite things about Souls is that nothing to lose feeling that makes you, do stupid things and make corpse runs and make runs for items and stuff like that. I wasn't doing that because it was too tedious to sit through the loading screens.
Yeah. Which sucks in a game whose mechanics, at least at the start, are designed to encourage you to take more risks.
Yes. Yeah. And, like, exactly. I didn't want to parry. I didn't want to do things like that because it meant dying, and it meant, waking back, like a minute of just kind of downtime.
No.
And then
and
running back to that
possibly
place.
Farming for some blood vials there too.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh my God. Yeah. We'll get into that.
Yeah.
Like, one of the things about this game too, and this is something, the Gary hates Bloodborne thing that popped up during the season, where it's like, guys, no, I hate Dark Souls 3. What do you think? I don't hate Bloodborne.
And even that, Allison dug up a quote from the preview episode where we did the first run through, where you about Dark Souls 3, Gary said, "Hey, this is fun. I like this game. It's going to be a fun season."
Yeah. Well, pencils have erasers. Like
I'm not holding that against you. It's just like things change and they evolve. I just thought that was really funny.
It was funny. I feel I feel fine about it, actually. Yeah. I feel good about that whole season. But like one of the things I think that that meme or that reaction came to is that when we were recording this, I feel like at least then, and this has lessened a little bit, but there was this game had a sterling reputation. Mm-hmm. And I was worried that like if no one is going to pay attention to or examine any of the flaws in this, they're not going to get better.
Right.
And some of that stuff happened with Dark Souls 3. Like there are things I think that are flaws in like the DLC of Dark Souls 3 specifically, but in parts of Dark Souls 3 that have their origins in Bloodborne. Mm-hmm. Like playing through it again, and we'll talk about this, but like going through Yarhagul, it felt the same as going through the Ring City.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not even supposed to look at anything, am I? Like I have to. This is so hostile and so dense with encounters. And so just like overwhelming that like you just have to run through it and just learn the way to run through it. And I was bummed out by that, and that's something that this kind of started here. And I was very worried about like if this is going to happen, like no one's going to ever like pay attention to these ways this game could be better. Like it's not going to get better with subsequent entries, and that kind of happened. So like in looking back on it, like kind of I kind of spot listened to some old episodes that we did from the season and revisiting it. I think that's where kind of that animosity came from. That's what I was reacting to, is just like, no, like this is actually like this blood vial thing is a real problem. Like it's not just kind of like, oh, it's fine. The game is so good in spite of it. It's like the game is really, really good in spite of it. Everyone in the world should play Bloodborne. I love Bloodborne. This blood vial thing is really bad though.
Yeah.
And like it needs to be addressed. Like it would need to be fixed. And that doesn't apply to Dark Souls 3, but some of the encounter design stuff does, I think.
Yeah.
I think that encounter design stuff was definitely there in the earlier Dark Souls games and Demon Souls too, but there tended to be just more stuff you could do instead of that and then come back to it later.
Yeah.
Whereas something like Yarhagul, like you got to do it. You gotta run down this hell staircase with a big demon over top of it. So
yeah, there's definitely like I think that's a factor where there's linearity, but I also think like so Yarhagul is them doing the same thing they've been doing since Demon Souls, which is the summoner character. Like enemies will respawn and compare that to like 4-2 or compare that to the Catacombs, which is the equivalent in those games. They're just much less dense. Mm-hmm. Yarhagul, there are more of them. They're better hidden, the bell ringers. They have a wider area of effect for things they respawn than they do. So I think that's true that there is that linearity plays into it, but I also think that they are ramped up a little bit.
Yeah.
There. And like the nice thing about Bloodborne, you're very agile, so you can get around this stuff. But then that comes down to a little bit of a preference where like I want to stop and take my time because that's how I play these games, which is
you don't have the same defensive options that you would in a Dark Souls game for getting through a huge crowd of enemies.
No.
Either. There's no tanking hits.
Yeah. And just the fact that you can't tank and you have no poise. So if you get down to the street level, which is just full of snipers, like every one of those those corpse carts are a ranged and melee attacker. Getting hit once, it's very easy to get hit once while somebody else is, that stops you from dodging. Somebody's right next to you. Mm-hmm. They hit you. It's very easy for those things to add up very quickly, in a way that just feels very like hostile that I don't particularly care for, and that they doubled down on you know, in the DLC specifically of Dark Souls 3. There's not very much of that, and there's a little bit of it in Archdragon Peak.
Yeah.
But there's not as much of it in the actual main game.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a real tangent that went on talking about areas and stuff, but I still think it counts as a generality.
It certainly does. Because, you know, when we're trying to place this in the, you know, the overall evolution of the series, you know, this was developed alongside Dark Souls 2, but, you know, it does have, you know, things that are direct antecedents to what we would see in Dark Souls 3 itself. You know, like when we look at the changes here, this does stand out. And I think this stands out enough that people try to treat it like it's its own separate series. But no, like there are trends that can point directly to what happened with the series in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's visually even obvious. Like when you play Dark Souls 3, and there are things that just feel like they're straight lifted from this.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. Do you have anything that I feel like, hopefully I don't, Stuart, never feel like you can't interrupt us or anything like that. Please. Me and Kole get into like a rhythm, and then we just kind of talk sometimes. So
it's very similar to listening to the podcast. So it's a little, trying to get in on that is a little weird. Anyway, it's fine. I'll do it. Interrupt the crap out of you.
Do it.
Yeah, definitely do, because I don't want to. I definitely don't want to talk over anybody. I apologize. I just get so passionate, guys. That's
why we're Gary. Calm down, Gary. Don't hurt him. Okay?
I can't.
We are here to hear you be the Alex Jones of
Amnesia Chili.
Yeah. Amnesia Chili all the Dark Descent.
Yeah. So I'll throw that to you, Stewart, on either of those points about the game changing over the course of its, you know, like since its release as they try to get it up and stable, or about the, you know, where it ended up being in the broader sense of the series. Do you have anything to observe about either of those kind of points?
My first experience with the game was a little weird. I bought it digitally, and, you know, I was waiting for it to download, and it did that download thing where it's like, oh, the game is playable now, but it was really only playable up to the Gascoigne fight.
Oh, no.
Which I completed pretty quickly overall, and then the game was like, it'll be another 20 hours before this finishes downloading. It's like, I was like, oh, I took time off work for this. So that was a bit of a pain, but the experience I had with it the first time, like, I did not know about the memory leak for a very long time. So I had thought that some things were very different. I know Gary talked about his experience fighting Abritus the first time, thinking about it like this idiot god, but I had that same kind of thing for Martyr Logarius.
Yeah, that happened for me with Logarius. It wasn't so much with Abritus, but like Logarius was a breeze. And a lot of people cited him as a problem later on. When we talk about this memory leak, it was something that was present, I think, in the first couple of months after the game's retail release, which was, you know, something about the way the game was programmed caused it to, I think, if you just left the application running. So if you were like me and you're playing it and it's time to go to sleep, so you just quit out of the game, but you just stay at the title and put the PlayStation 4 to sleep, come back to it. You've never actually like cleared anything on the system itself. Somebody who knows more about this is probably screaming at me, and I'm sorry. But before they patched this up, leaving the game on, in quotes, for a very long time would actually cause enemy behavior to get a little bit crazy. So this oftentimes resulted in boss fights becoming much easier than they were designed to be. So the Abritus idiot god thing, like Abritus did not, you know, attack as much as she ought to have. I think for Logarius, it ended up being like you could just run up to him and parry him and he was done. A bunch of stuff like that. So that was something where my first playthrough, and I think a lot of people's first playthrough, was markedly easier than any other subsequent ones after they went in and patched that up.
When I fought Logarius, he just never ever used his magic and never charged up.
Oh, that's the one. Yeah.
So I was just like, oh, this guy, like, sure, he like jumps around with his scythe and crap, but whatever, I can handle this guy. And then a friend of mine who played it was like, I'm having so much trouble with Logarius. I'm like, why? He's like, all these like skulls and everything. Like, what the hell are you talking about? What skulls?
Yeah. So. The way that articulates with Abritus is she just does her headbutt.
Yeah.
And it it supported what I wanted so much, or my initial read of her just being this idiot god, because like she's literally just banging her head into the ground, and it did tons of damage. It was just like really pretty easy to avoid, and it was super cool. Like I actually loved it. And
I really like that read of Agridas.
Yeah.
Like I like that idea for her a lot.
Me too. Like I like I think it's a really cool thing. And then, it's not, that's not what it actually is, but I think that's a really cool thing. And that kind of plays into a larger, but Matthew Matosas, who is a YouTube critic I like, did a video they just released today where he kind of compares later Souls games to Demon Souls. And one of the things he talks about when he talks about Bloodborne is how much he likes the Mikolash fight, because it feels like an intentional anticlimax in a way that the games used to do more of. He brings up, obviously, he made an Estrella, but I would say, Mikolash is a good example of that as well. And my version of Abritas that I only got to fight once would be a version of that as well, and that's something I value. Like, I really like those kind of like, this is a gimmick. This is, either like, it's not even a puzzle like the Dragon God. This is just an idea that you're presented with rather than a challenge to overcome.
Right. This is boss as communication.
Yes. And that's why, that's one of the reasons why I love Mikolash so much, which we'll get to.
Yeah, that is something that I felt like the series kind of moved away from a bit. Like that was definitely there in Demon Souls and sort of there in Dark Souls, but like Bloodborne is just so hard sometimes. Like it's just so unrelenting, and especially with like, which I'm sure we'll get to, the Orphan of Kos. That thing is a nightmare. And Dark Souls 3 adding that, especially in the DLC of Dark Souls 3, having some of those boss fights just be like, okay, you've gotten the idea across, but would you like to experience it 2 more times, but harder?
Yeah. That kind of sustained perfection, which we talk about a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Bloodborne is such a fast-paced game, and every area kind of builds on the previous one. On a macro level, their idea of a pacing spacer is just to give you a shorter area. Like, you get to Bergenworth after the Forbidden Woods, right? And like that is a bit of a breather, but it also introduces some new mechanics with those frenzy flies or whatever, and then also the toughest enemy hunter you're ever going to encounter, toughest single enemy hunter. Yeah, like that is their idea. Whereas before in the series, they did have these things built in. You had your butterflies, moonlight, and your storm kings and stuff.
Yeah, you had downtime mechanically a little bit more than you do in this game.
Yeah.
And those shorter areas, they do help the pacing quite a bit.
Yeah.
So like Bergenworth or going into the lecture hall, something like that does feel different and changes that. I think that it could have used just a little bit more of that, and I think that you're right. It does give the plot this kind of sense of continuously speeding up, because like, unlike a lot of other games in the series, this does have a sense of urgency to it. Like time passes.
Yeah.
In this game, like you get to see the world getting worse and getting more apocalyptic as you go, and they do that a little bit in Dark Souls 3, but here it's much more gradual and you see it much earlier. So it does make you feel much more kind of harried, and that's cool. However, I do think like the levels kind of suffered a little bit from it. Like in going back on revisiting it, some of the back half stuff does feel a little fatiguing because I want that downtime more considered. Play from time to time. Yeah. Not all the time, just every once in a while.
That advancing of the moon and kind of the as you get closer to the pale blood moon, being out in full and causing all of the the inside effects and stuff like that. Like, I think that is a very good idea. It's the most accessible on your revisit to the Cathedral Ward. Like, I think that is the apotheosis of it. But that is like a 1-2 punch of then you go to Yahar Ghul again, and you get back to those problems that we gave before. Where it is, like you've been there before. You had the opportunity to open up a shortcut. Maybe you could get the Tomatrus. But there's so much more of it that is not, that you can't really obviate by preparation.
That moment could have really used a like entry to Andor Londo kind of approach where you're taking some time. There's not a lot of enemies around you, and you're just sort of taking in the scenery and the change to the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I will say it's pretty badass because you come into Yahar Ghul the second time via a different entrance, right? Like that is an amazing moment when this place that you had been before, where you had no idea where it was, like, you know, like what is the relationship? You only ever warped in and warped out. When you came to it and realized that this is just a sealed off section of the city, I think that's an amazing piece of world building. But you know, you're absolutely right, Stuart, that did need something to let you get acclimated. Like that moment and that area could have landed a lot harder if they just gave it some room to breathe, if they decanted it.
It's really even like right at the doorway to that place, because you appear on that little platform and you want to be like, oh, here's this neat city, but there's an amygdala right there who's gonna like take you and crush you in his hand to just be like, haha.
And the hunters start coming up from the floor, or the townspeople start bubbling up from the floor, and those aren't people you could then like, okay, these are easy, I'm gonna kill them and then drink in the city because they come back,
right?
Yeah. At that point, so like it definitely needed that. I think that just to underline a point you made, Cole, because I think it's a really good one, is that this is them using that. This is one of the times I'm not going to say it's the only time, because that's an absolute, and absolutes are scary on podcasts where people on Twitter throw every absolute statement you ever make back in your face for weeks.
Yeah,
but
years.
Like it feels like one of the only times they've narratively used that teleportation mechanic. The fact that you can only teleport there, that teleportation thing is totally a gameplay consideration, but here they're using it to do something cool, as opposed to it being a detraction, which it usually is.
Yeah.
People usually, people complain about the entries post Dark Souls 1 because they don't have that feeling of an interconnected world, and it's a good complaint, because they don't have that. But here is actually an advantage. Like getting teleported to a place and finding out it's right under your nose is huge, is like really, really strong.
No.
And can only work with a system where you have that teleportation in place from the beginning.
The closest I've ever felt to this was going back to the Asylum in Dark Souls 1.
Yeah. And this is not even, even just getting taken there also plays with the teleportation, or the kind of movement thing. Like even just getting kidnapped in, where I was responsible for getting everywhere, I was going to get before that is also a really, really great feeling.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, we talked about speed kind of on the macro level. Let's zoom in a little bit and talk about combat and kind of generalities and how this is different and where that succeeds and fails and how it feels.
Yeah.
Stuart, is this a thing? Because most people I know for whom Bloodborne is their favorite Souls game, this is usually their central, their keystone to it. Is that how it is for you as well? Or are there other elements that kind of make this your alpha?
The combat is really beautiful. I like how it turns into kind of a fluid dance all the time, but this is also sort of my standard Souls character, is like one who generally isn't using a shield, is dodging around and parrying enemies as often as possible. So it just kind of fit really well into my style. Whereas I know some friends who favor more bulky, tanky approaches got really, really screwed by this game in the beginning because they just had no way to make progress in it because all of their tricks were useless. And I mean, the combat is nice. I never really delved deep into the regain system. Trying to be that frantic puts me too on edge and makes me too tense. But I really, really got into the combat of it, which, I never did any of the PvP because the PvP is nonsense and awful. But but that seems like it would be just a nightmare of people dodging and healing and dodging and healing and dodging and healing forever. So.
Yeah, it definitely happens. When I hear people complain about the PvP, that's a bit, you heal so quickly and everyone starts with so many vials that it's just like, it goes on forever.
Yeah.
One thing we should probably mention is that we're not going to talk about the PvP in general a lot.
Right.
In this revisit thing, just because Cole and I don't know it very much.
Right.
So if people who we have as guests who spend more time with it, definitely they can speak to it more, but I didn't go back and play any PvP in my revisits because it's just not an important part of the series to me.
No.
I have done a bit here and there, and it has been just like dodge, get caught on scenery, die kind of thing. Because for some reason, the main place I ever got invaded was in the Nightmare Frontier, which is just the worst. So
that'd do it. That's a whole area that is designed around being invaded. That also is the most inconvenient place to move around. Yeah.
Oh yes, It's dreadful. But also, I think that there's a certain extent to which Bloodborne is kind of helped by not having a great PvP scene, because I'm going to get so many fewer people who are going to do whatever the in-game equivalent of teabagging is, or something, or griefing me in some fashion or another.
Yeah.
Or even just invading.
Yeah.
Like, it just comes up less.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really,
which is to its strength, because it is a game that I think it doesn't always let you do this, as we were talking about, but I think it's stronger when you can kind of drink in the atmosphere and think about it as you move through.
Yeah, I think it's a stronger solo experience than a lot of the other games end up being. Just because this personal weird story happening is is a stronger thing than, the people who come in and give me a, well, what is it? And then proceed to murder me.
Right.
Yeah, who are specced for misery.
Yeah.
Yes.
The people who are just like, I have made a build that is just meant to, fuck over people.
Yeah.
And like there's
even on that, there isn't really the variety available in Bloodborne to do that. Like, there are some tricks you can play, but they're pretty minor in comparison to a lot of things in Dark Souls 2 or 3, which seem like intentionally there to piss you off.
Yeah, there's no scraping spear equivalent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or acid spray or the like.
Yeah,
And there's not even like, there aren't so much in the way of like kind of an optimal build in it. There's like, it's not like the power curve is real flat. In Bloodborne, and like the weapons all feel very different, but the distinctions are so subtle as to like it's like a million. If you look at a pie chart, you have a pretty narrow slice of pie, and within that's divided 100 times. But there's a whole section of the pie you're not getting. So like, yes, there's a wide variety of weapons. Yes, they are very they feel different, but they're very subtly they're subtle distinctions that are built for this kind of mastery, this character action. Kind of fighting game approach where every move that your weapon makes, the length, like the back of your hand, that kind of thing. But then there are huge swaths of the pie that just aren't touched. So that's part of the reason why I think PvP is so limp in this game, is because like there's just not that much variety to it. Like any character you fight is going to be fairly similar to any other character you fight, because you're all in that like micro slices of that healthy slice of pie,
Because you all will be able to dodge quickly and heal quickly and parry each other, and there's no real difference there.
You'll all be able to do those things. You have either a heavy weapon or a slow weapon. You have different amounts of spread on them, but they all have roughly the same range of like your character, at maximum, like your character kind of laying down in front of themselves. Like 6 feet in front of you is the most if you have like the threaded cane or something like that, like your high range weapon. But it's not going to be. The distinctions are just going to be very subtle. Yeah. And it's one of the things that, coupled with that speed that you have, makes the main game like pretty fun, but ultimately really samey to me.
Yeah.
When I go through it, like I think I don't want to move off the kind of combat speed too quickly, because it is really important. Yeah. That kind of character action, that dodge. And that's how, like, I play these games lots of different ways, and I usually will play a shieldless character. So like, it wasn't weird to go to this. I too like did not get real into regain, partly because when I started playing, I was so risk averse because I didn't want to die, because I didn't want to watch loading screens, and I kind of got into that habit. Yeah. But the fact that there's just like a whole section of kind of play experiences that are not available to you is a big bummer. And I know a lot of people it didn't bother, but it kind of it permeated like most aspects of the game for me.
Yeah. Well, what you get on the other side of that, or on the back of that, is an experience that is much more tuned, right? And all of the differences are going to exist on the margin, right? Like, I think that in general, if you are speccing for an item that you want, there's no real way to like trap yourself into a corner and fuck you, and there's no meta that you have to observe if you either want to participate in that or want to hold your own against people who are invading. So in a lot of ways, they are kind of like guiding you down those rails. And like, I think it's satisfying for a moment to moment, but like the greater build variety does give the game much more replay value, as we've seen with Dark Souls 1 and 2, and to an extent 3 as well. You just it's been a big trade-off that we've noticed.
And I might hate the trolls in PvP, but there is a lot of good cooperation and PvP stuff that does exist and has come from that diverse character build structure.
Yeah.
Like my most recent in Dark Souls 3 was like a character who was spec'd to be your friend but invaded you as a bad guy, and that was fun and challenging, trying to get people to trust me, especially in the Ring City where they did not want to.
Yep.
Yeah. And even that it allowed for it, that's like another kind of omission because that's part of a covenant, and the covenant system in Bloodborne is underdeveloped.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You know, there's nothing as wildly kind of creative as the purple phantoms in Dark Souls 3.
Oh, right, right. The purple phantoms kind of can't be beat in my mind. I think that was that was like, a wonderful idea.
I think they really can be. I mean, like I think grave lording is a cooler idea. Like there's definitely cooler ideas, but
in
it's
terms
a return
of like
to
implementation
form.
or like realization. Yeah. You both mentioned like not pursuing the regain system. Like I understand that there are blood gems and there are runes that you can use to kind of like really gain that system. I think that actually regaining your health by attacking enemies, before the recharge period is gone, does contribute to the game feeling a lot faster. And like a lot of the ways that it falls down later on are when the enemies or the situations they put you in subvert that system and make you unable to, make those recoveries.
Oh, like absolutely. Like when I say didn't pursue it, I mean, it wasn't like my main focus. Like I definitely did it.
Yeah.
But I think that it's two things. So I think that you're right. Like later in the game, they start introducing, longer combos, attacks that do more damage, more mobs, more getting sniped while fighting mobs, things like that are going to lead to you, regain being subverted just because you get stun locked. It also is just a function, and then grab attacks, frenzy, obviously the things that subvert the regain system. There's also just a function of just higher difficulty that subverts the regain system, where like regain to me works it's the best when I can take a hit and not worry about it that much.
Yeah.
Like it's like, oh, this did 40% of my health. That's not a big deal. But if something does 80% of my health, getting in there to regain when I'm trying to be situationally aware, there are things around me, or it could just be a character that just doesn't. It works best when I can take the hit and enemies are easy to read, and those two things cease being true as you deal with more eldritch monstrosities, more devastating range attacks, and higher damage.
Right.
And there's a specific moment where it happens. It's the snake-headed guys in the Forbidden Woods.
Yeah.
Like that's literally the moment in which I feel like regain stops being as good.
Right.
Like it still stays good for a while. You're going to fight more guys, but those snake guys, like I defy anyone to know which way an attack is coming from when they're constantly writhing. Everything's moving around. So they're made as this kind of chaff. So you don't know when they're attacking. They do so much fucking damage. They have a grab attack that looks like a regular attack. Like those things never become fun to fight.
Yeah.
They have poise like crazy.
Yep.
You can't stun them. They have so much health that it's very difficult in this playthrough. On my standard playthrough, I played through this game 3 times with the axe. Or no, I tried to do one with spells and didn't work great. But I did twice with the axe. Spell. I mean, we'll get into that real briefly too. Yeah. We had to get into our soul allegories. But the axe, and the axe has a lot of damage, has really good range, it's a really good weapon. This time I went through and I sequence broke to get Simon's bow blade because I was so cranky about the lack of build variety. I wanted to see what this game would look like in a game where everyone has a gun. What would it be like to have a ranged attack? And it kind of sucks. You can't buff it with anything.
Yeah.
It doesn't do, when it's not the bow, it's just kind of like a decent longsword.
Yep.
But I couldn't, at the point I was at the game, I could not one combo those snake guys. I could plink them with arrows, but those take up quicksilver bullets, which meant I couldn't try to parry the snake guys, which meant that I had 20 bullets, or I'd have to start dipping into my health. Once I started dipping into my health, then you have to start like farming blood vials. Like it doesn't really work. And it's one of those things where like, I wonder if the game would be better. Like there's a conflict somewhere in there of me and also the game supporting, or like there being situations that would be good to have more approaches and the game not providing them, versus the game playing to its strengths. And when it works, it really, really works. So there's some, I kind of lost the plot, but there's some kind of conflict somewhere in there that I'm trying to circle around.
Yeah.
That's actually the build I did this time through as well, is going after Simon's Bowblade really early, which fighting him is a huge pain in the ass.
Oh,
Oh
that
Jesus!
sucked.
Yeah, tell that story because Gary, you told it to me, and that was like that did not sound worth it.
I actually had heard Gary was doing it, and I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. I'm going to try that. So I blame you.
Fair enough.
But
Guilty as charged.
So when I attacked him, I was rocking, I think, like a +5 saw spear at the time, and it was not enough for a very long time. And it ended up being I led him back into the little cathedral area where your first lantern is in the nightmare, and just kiting him around the railings of the little platform so he couldn't shoot me. And just waiting for him to get a little brave and come up to me, hitting him for like 20 damage, and then he'd run away and do it again. And it probably took something like 25 minutes.
Oh God!
Yeah, it's excruciating.
I ran out of blood vials and I ran out of bullets during the whole thing, and just being tense for that long is a problem.
25 minutes is unacceptable. That's like the giant cactuar fight in Final Fantasy VIII. No, thank you.
I feel like most things like that in games, when it's like, oh, you can do this, you can break this sequence and spend a lot of time and patience, it's not worth it. like 9 times out of 10, it's like, oh, you could do this, but like, it ends up kind of sucking. And I ended up regretting it because it's like I wanted this kind of variety, I didn't get it, and I had less fun than I would have if I had just done a basic playthrough.
Oh yeah, like I was looking for Path of Least Resistance, and spoiler, I'm doing that for all these games. So my Bloodborne was just like, rush for the Tonitrus, you got it, boy. Do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I got stuck on ROM for a while in this playthrough, and when I found out I couldn't use the lightning paper, like I couldn't buff the sword, the bowblade, it was like my jaw dropped. I was like, why? Like, this weapon is not overpowered. Like, why would you make that decision?
That was a painful moment.
Oh, that absolutely had to have been a PvP consideration.
Well, that's the thing too, and that's a general thing that we'll get in this like. The way this series, the single player interacts with the PvP is a huge bummer to me.
Yeah.
Like it's only for me, because I mean, just to my personal desires, like usually when they make changes for PvP, it's to the game's detriment.
Yeah.
For my experience.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I also just generally think balance is bullshit. So like, and that is primarily the place where that pops up. Yeah.
You're not StarCraft.
Right.
Like stop trying to be like, it is not the biggest deal that like somebody can be a little bit overpowered. Like, that's interesting. Yeah. Underpowered and overpowered things are interesting. Yeah. So, kind of, because we do have to get over to our Soulsagories.
Yeah. Did you have something to go to next?
I was just going to briefly, I mean, this is too many negative things in a row, but I was going to talk, it can be my biggest bummer, but I was going to talk about blood vials.
Oh, that's my biggest bummer. Let's go to that later. Something that came up that I want to talk about is let's not do this as a bummer. If it is one of your bummers, that's fine. But I want to bring it up as a missed opportunity, which is the presence of Blood Tinge and Arcane builds, and just the way that was kind of, I don't know, squandered. In terms of like, man, I really wish that like a ranged combat build in a game with guns would have been viable. I wish that, tapping into these ancient forbidden arts in a game about Lovecraft would have been kind of more possible, earlier on. That's something that I could have built toward, right? It's like the Simpsons Super Bowl episode with no football or Dolly Parton singing, Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Like when I tried to do that magic build, I was so disappointed by it. Because the ultimate spell you can get, the like Call from Beyond or whatever, like is very good.
Oh yeah,
like it's a very good spell that requires
died to it many times outside of Rom's arena.
Requires something like 60 arcane or 55 arcane or something. I don't know the exact number, but it's an insane investment.
Yeah.
And there are only really 4 stats that matter in Bloodborne, so like having a big investment like that is okay. It's like 2 that everyone uses, and then you choose 2 other ones.
Right.
So having a high stat investment is not that big a deal, but what it means is that you're just not going to be able to use it for most of the game. So for the most of the game, you're shooting those like Ligarius as little skulls, or even before that, you're just doing Abritus's, tentacles, which just does piddling damage. Like, you're never meant to do damage in ways other than your melee weapon in this game.
Right.
Yeah. when I did an arcane build, it actually ups your item find as well, because it's, it does your luck. But like, what am I going to find? Like, what am I going to get from that that's going to be really useful?
That has to have been a way to juice the number of Quicksilver bullets you get, so you can cast more.
Even then, I think I noticed a bit of a deficit on them in compared to how I normally go at it. And my standard build is like a Dex Blood Tinge build, or skill Blood Tinge.
Yeah,
because I like me the Evelyn, and I think it's it's just an awesome gun. But but yeah.
Yeah, that finding thing. So like, what are you gonna find? That's a big. We talked about that a lot in the main season, but like,
I mean, our
I do
job's
think
so
Bloodborne
hard.
makes it. Well, I think it makes it like has a treasure problem, has a reward problem where like partway through the game, going and finding going out of your way ceases to be kind of meaningful. Like finding these secrets, these mechanical benefits for exploration. One of the things that's interesting about it, and this could have, I'm not trying to bring us into the blood vial thing early, but like. Early on, they use that to give you more blood vials. That dries up like in a serious way. And same thing with Quicksilver bullets. Like you stop finding those things partway through, and that's a real bummer because like right when you're going to start needing them, like they should have been piling them on to you as far as item finds.
Yes,
like corpses hanging over ledges should have 10 on them. In Yarhagul. It wouldn't have made it too easy. It just would have prevented that kind of grind. Instead, like, again, it's bloodstones, which because they couldn't have, they didn't have very much equipment. They couldn't have you find equipment. They had to have you find bloodstones. Because they have so many bloodstones in the game, they up the requirement. So the game requires a lot of bloodstones to upgrade things.
Yeah.
And then
this game has more treadmills than an OK Go video.
And then also like bloodstones and blood gems, which like it's a crapshoot whether it'll fit, and those run into that boring Dragon Age problem of insanely incremental upgrades.
Yeah, marginal percentages and stuff like that. Or most egregiously, when you think, hey, that's going to be a succulent, juicy apple at the right time. I'm so hungry. And then no, it is a challenge dungeon or a chalice ingredient.
Chalice ingredient.
Yeah,
which like I mean, if chalices weren't the biggest bummer for one of us, like I was going to flip the table and quit the podcast. So I will definitely bring that to the table.
Oh yeah,
if you got blood vials, I got chalices.
I purposefully avoided it, so don't worry.
Yeah.
and in those chalices are where the blood gems actually start to get a little interesting because they become good enough that any of those like add slow poison effects or something actually start to become relevant instead of the like add slow poison 1. And you're like, well, that will literally never poison anything before I kill it.
That will never proc.
Yeah. It's burying a bad system in another bad system, which that's no good. So yeah.
It's what it does is it if you look at like when you have a reward and then you look at what you're encouraging with that reward. Like I'm way more comfortable with encouraging me checking out all the parts of the level than like going down and doing chalice diving.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Hey guys, we've been really negative for a while. I want to pull to pull the yaw up a little bit, or the pitch, whatever one applies, and say something that I really love about this, about Bloodborne in general, is how much amazing optional content there is.
Oh yeah.
Other than chalice dungeons.
Right, other than chalice dungeons. I'm thinking specifically, like, I figured we would get to this in best areas, but just in general, this is, I think, the Souls game that has felt okay about burying its light under a bushel with amazing areas like the Forsaken Castle Canehurst and also the Upper Cathedral Ward. Like, those are two of my favorite areas in this game and like the entire series that you never, ever have to go to.
Yeah. Like I think that's a thing, and I think Dark Souls 1 does that as well.
Yep.
But I think it's really great here, and those are phenomenal areas for really different reasons too.
Yep.
Like Canehurst is like just an amazing level on its own as far as visually and atmosphere wise. What it adds to the story, I think, is actually kind of detrimental. I don't really like how Canehurst fits into the story. But then the Upper Cathedral Ward adds to the story in amazing creepy ways.
Yeah.
That's a plot bomb that's like totally hidden. And there are smaller sub areas that are really hidden too. There's that weird like grain silo big tower that you fall down to get to that weird back alley area with the brain sucker.
Yep.
in central. Like there are lots of little side areas like that are very, very cool.
And the hidden old Hunter's Workshop right off of that as well.
Oh
is
man!
Just,
oh yeah,
that's such an amazing moment finding that.
Let's save that for later.
Yeah, we gave what's its head, the Forsaken Firelink so much credit.
Yep.
And like Bloodborne did that better like one game earlier. Like that's so much, it's going back to the old Firelink in Dark Souls 3 is cool.
Mm-hmm.
But man, finding the Hunter's Workshop.
Yeah.
I'd argue that's cooler.
Oh, yeah.
And let's give being positive, like visually this game is astounding.
Oh my god.
Oh, yeah.
Like not just like kind of like normal graphics, like quality of models, quality of light, but the art direction is so good. It actually does, even though in the city it gets a little tedious where there's just like you can't walk without stepping over a tombstone. There are areas that use some of the PS4 kind of clutter aesthetic to good effect. So like specifically Hemwick.
Hemwick, yeah.
Hemwick like looks amazing. Like that looks lived in and grungy and terrifying and haunted house-y in a classic sense that is just like really, really deft kind of placement and visually.
It hits that Gothic village atmosphere just so perfectly.
Yeah, perfectly.
Yeah,
absolutely perfectly.
Gravestones packed so tightly that they have to like extend beyond each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, clutter to good effect.
Yeah, clutter to just like absolutely wonderful effect. Some of the enemy designs are the strongest in the series. Like the grin on my face of like the first like goopy student, character, and I'm like, this is so weird in a way the series hasn't really been since Demon Souls.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is really weird.
Yeah.
And that sense of the weird, or just even the aliens, and the first time you run into those, that's like such a good moment. And they look so like they're dorky good in the way that Dark Souls 1 and Demon Souls are really good at.
Yeah. Well, like half of or more than half of the kind of the effort that was expended on those, why they're effective is the animation. The way those aliens run at you by like kind of toddling and trying to keep their head balanced, that communicates so much about how ungainly these poor, unfortunate beings are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the contrast for them is so much stronger because you've been fighting these, humanoid enemies and beasts this whole time. And then you come across a goop student and you're like, that's real silly, but it's also very creepy. And it rides that line just so well.
Yeah.
And even the contrast, not just in kind of tone, but even color wise,
yep.
right? Like everything is dressed as kind of this, diseased pilgrim aesthetic. And then just to have those aliens that are, a very like brilliant shade, or those goopy students who are pale, something that is kind of bright and luminescent. In the midst of all this drabness, like really, really works.
Yeah.
Like visually, this is arguably the best looking Souls game, I think.
Yeah.
I think I'm willing to put that seal on it. I'm willing to say that it's the best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In that regard.
For a game with two tonally very distinct different, halves, it is incredibly cohesive between the two of them. In a way, like it is this nice gradual crossfade that brings you into it. There's an amazing amount of intentionality behind the design that's shown.
Oh, sorry to.
No, don't worry.
In the middle of that, but I think that's true. But I do feel like there's a little bit of a missed opportunity there too, because I think that like when you get to Nightmare of Mensis, like that looks really cool. Yarhagul actually sells that kind of like having a foot in both worlds things. I think that I would have liked to have seen the nightmare areas do a lot more with it.
Yeah.
Like I love that the lecture hall exists and you exit it into the nightmare, but like, what if in like the nightmare, like there were classroom buildings you walked through and they were built into the side of the scoop. It's what they do in the DLC.
Oh yeah.
So successfully. And that's what I wanted to see for that transition. So like the transition, they're totally consistent. The transition is not as smooth. Like it doesn't have that like foot in both worlds, one world kind of being subsumed feeling that like I would have really appreciated.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird how a lot of games, when they're representing a nightmare or some kind of hallucination of some kind, will change things on you in the game. Like in Point Lookout, for instance, there's, you're walking along through the area and suddenly you're walking on the trees or something like that. And it's sort of a trick of the level design, but Souls games are almost always very consistent with their worlds.
Mm-hmm.
So the way they end up fitting that kind of stuff together, like walking through the clock in the Astral Clock Tower or something like that, is almost more effective for me because I'm expecting this very solid, consistent world. And the transfer between them is just so jarring, and it's really great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's explicitly like a dream. Like that dreamlike quality is really, really strong there. I think maybe part of what I'm picking up on is that areas that are in the nightmare don't have, enough of like a dreamlike sense to them. They just look like alien planets to me.
Yeah, just like really just push the throttle when it comes to illogical spaces.
Yeah,
like that is what I would want if they were leaning into this thing that I really love about the the dreamlike H.P. Lovecraft style stuff.
Yeah, and we didn't, we've been kind of like talking about this. We haven't even talked about like the plot or kind of like lore things to this, which is, I think, plotting wise, you can also make a specifically plot. So I'm not saying lore or themes, even though thematically I think it's really strong. I think you can say like the plot is one of the strongest and most straightforward in the game. Like the kind of things it deals with, what actually happened, the feeling of the story of this division in the church. All of these, there are some like cliches and some tropes, but they're all tropes I absolutely love.
Yeah.
Like, a society right on the verge of, being in this kind of Victorian era experimental science thing, being exposed to like a dark god or things that are explicitly mystic, just does it for me in like a big, big bad way. And I absolutely adore it.
And as it relates to the sort of plots of the other games, they tend to be all about, kings who have a lot of power and don't want to give it up, and and you having to come along and punch the power out of them. But Bloodborne is a lot more about like, hey, maybe that power isn't for you. Maybe it's for like great beings from beyond the stars, and maybe you're not good enough for this to anybody. And I like that sort of ethos a lot more than the ones espoused by like Demon Souls or Dark Souls, which are still good. Don't get me wrong, but
Bloodborne stands out because, unlike the other entries in the series, where you are arriving at the site of a catastrophe well after it's happened, like the ash has settled, sometimes quite literally, and what you're dealing with are these fallen gods, these degraded great heroes who are holding on to whatever little power they have. That's true for some places in Bloodborne, but very much you are arriving maybe not in the middle of the crisis, but definitely while it is still ongoing. There is less of an anthropological bent to the way things unfold because the action is still happening. And I think that plays into the sense of urgency, and I think the necessary simplicity of what's going on, because everybody still has to be alive. The different factions still have to be active to a certain extent. And even when they dig into stuff that is far, far in the past, it is presented through the nightmare, through the dream, as something that is still going on symbolically, that will have a tremendous effect on the things that you have seen leading up to it. So I think that that is something that is massively different about Bloodborne compared to the rest of the series. Yeah.
And I want to underline that, where it's like, it is, that feeling of archaeology that the other entries have is very important to me.
Me too.
So to me, this isn't better, but it does make it feel really fresh.
Yep.
And for this kind of story, you could do that kind of immediacy complements this kind of story very much, because in a weird way, it doesn't turn out to be really this way in the end, but the way it's presented to you is as saving the world.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to watch the story happening is quite literal. It is, the sun is setting, the moons are changing, all things are happening, and you get to see it happen. The other games where there is that kind of sense of fatalism, that underlines their themes a little bit more. But this has this sense of, starts off as you have to do something about this. As you kind of get further into it, that kind of drops away, and it starts putting this it kind of becomes a story about this archaeology, because it becomes about knowing what these movers and shakers did in this world and how they kind of damn themselves.
Yeah, it's a more recent investigation, I guess.
Yes,
is
it doesn't start out as
distinction.
too late, and it kind of becomes too late in a way.
Yeah.
And then there are elements of the story that I don't think work as well, but like the theming and stuff is actually like extremely good.
Yeah,
and yeah.
I love in the beginning when you first talk to Gehrman and he's like, "Oh, don't question any of this. It's fine. Don't worry. It's cool. This is just what hunters do."
Yeah, go out and kill a couple of beasts and see how you feel.
Yeah,
and that's like, and I tend to go in for when characters in a game talk to the player. And this is actually the first game, and I talked about this a lot during the season, but this kind of changed my way of looking at these games, where I feel like in previous games, it kind of made sense to be really hung up on the minutia. The lore elements, like the things like, oh, what specifically does this refer to? And there's a lot of good work that's done in that. Like specifically, Richard Pilbeam has done like amazing work in that realm. But the most enjoyment I got of this was kind of unfocusing my eyes and concentrating on those themes and feelings, which like to me makes perfect sense for a game about dreams or a game with a dreamlike sense.
Absolutely.
So very, very strong in that respect. Not airtight. There are things like I still don't really care for the Dumerians. Like I don't think they're particularly good.
Yeah.
No.
And I don't think like Cainhurst like actually makes tons of sense, or it feels unfinished to me.
Yeah.
Where this race of noble vampires that are probably descended from the Dumerians, where they fit into this world. Other than to cross another thing off their Universal Monsters Gothic horror list.
Right. Does it make sense to go into Souls Allegories at this point?
Sure.
Yeah, I think so. So let's let you start on the story.
Yeah.
So that way we don't bite any of your skeezes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I figured we would go around in each category.
Yeah.
So, Stuart, what's your favorite area in the game? Favorite level?
My favorite area by far is the orphanage in the Upper Cathedral Ward.
Nice.
It's so tight and so tiny and so scary. It's one of like Souls games almost never do background music, but there's two places in this that do, and they are both so terrifying for doing it. Because one's in Yaragul when you get dragged there by the kidnapper or whatever he is, and the other is in this orphanage, and it's pitch black. There's mind flayers everywhere. I know they're not actually called that, but whatever. And there's a chandelier covered in beasts.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh, okay, this area is all bright and light, and it'll be okay. And then that thing drops, and I'm like, oh god, they're in the dark. They're nearby.
Yeah. I can only see their eyes.
Yeah. There's the one that jumps in through the window a la Resident Evil.
It's a Resident Evil scare. I love it.
Yeah. Oh god.
I was gonna bring that up. Like explicitly is meant to be kind of a haunted house kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's so good. Actually, I know that happens every time. I'm like, okay, he's going to jump out. He's going to jump out, and he never does it when I think he's going to.
Yeah, I've been playing Resident Evil 1 for 20 years, and it still gets me. So they know a good thing when they see it.
And also that leads on to the wonderful make contact gesture, which I love that thing. I love all the lore surrounding that as well. And yeah, that area is just so tightly designed. And and looking at a map of it, it seems so simple. But that's just sort of the economy of space that I think From does really, really well.
Yeah, it uses shortcuts really well. And it climaxes really well, too. As much as I have issues with, like, the Celestial Emissary, I don't think is, like, a great boss fight. And I have issues with Abritus. Finding out that they have these things kind of hidden there. Like, going to the Lumen Flower Garden, seeing it as this kind of eerily, but definitely, like, astrologically, like, kind of outer space beautiful.
Color out of space.
Yeah, color out of space, and then having like they actually have this dead god they hauled up from this ancient city that they have in this area is just really, really astounding. Like, as a great capper to like, and it's an orphanage.
Yeah,
like it's a place where people send unwanted children. Like that's a really great area. Like
to be indoctrinated and to become agents, of kind of the facade that is around this thing.
Yeah. And a bit of that environmental storytelling. I know that coffin talk is generally banned on the podcast, but when I did get to the upper cathedral ward, I noticed that there were tiny coffins everywhere.
Yep.
And I was like, oh damn, oh boy, that's real spooky.
Yeah.
Also, in my first playthrough, I did not find Abritus. When I play through the games the first time, I always play through them offline because I feel like Souls does a lot better as like a very lonely experience.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know you could break the glass. I didn't know there was no message to guide me, and I was just like, oh, this boss was cool, but it's a little bit of an anticlimax for this place. Oh well.
Yeah.
And I never got to experience Abritus the first time, which I mean, I probably would have bounced pretty hard off of it, but still. But even without that, the area was just incredible. So,
how did you feel once you did burst through that window and discover that, holy shit, this is right above the actual church, the main cathedral, where not only I saw the Amygdala statues, but also fought, the last remaining living member of this church in Vicar Amelia? Like, that architectural connection, like, did that land for you?
Oh, it did very strongly. I was in this dual place of being like, oh my god, this is so cool, and oh my god, I didn't get this organically. No.
Yeah.
Oh, but and then I died to Abritus a bunch of times, and I'm like, okay, this is still cool, but
yeah. I didn't bother beating Abritus this time, so
no.
How about you, Cole? Or I'm sorry.
I was just saying that I beat Abritus every time now, just because I like to go through the whole Alfred and Elise storyline.
Oh yeah.
So that is the part of it I hate the most. But
yep,
I just got to do it. I love that story. Anyway,
for me, my favorite would be the research lab. Sorry if I scooped yours, Gary, but I think we both share a similar.
No, I've got backups.
Okay,
So.
Yeah, I have backups as well.
Yeah.
It was your mistake for making me go first. No, I love the research lab, not only because the Old Hunters is an amazing piece of DLC, and it's great to see what they had a chance to make once they had the full perspective on the main game itself, but because it is such a story-rich area. I'm going to go for the dark science every time, but to see this combination, hospital, to hear these people kind of begging for their lives on their gurneys and on their stretchers and stuff, while I am going around and killing the most far gone of them, I think that it's an area that is loaded with incredible pathos while still also being incredibly fun to play. I think that, in terms of design, in terms of, using this kind of wide open space where the majority of the exploration that you're doing is on the margins and unlocking these elevator based shortcuts back to each other. This is some really old school Soul stuff that is executed, I think, at maybe the height of their powers a little bit. So it's this wonderful kind of synthesis between the two of them with these amazing moments that are put into it. When you see, the mirror of the Lumen Flower Garden, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you see just kind of how much of this crisis extended, from this place, you get that architectural anthropological and investigative kind of reveal when you get in here. But yeah, like that sense of pathos cannot be oversold, I think, and that's ultimately what makes it for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think
it's wonderfully weird, like flip flop, like.
Oh yeah.
The NPC who you have to go get brain matter for,
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
And spooky. and also a little non-intuitive when you have to kill her for her own brain fluid. And
yep.
Yeah.
I mean, sure. I really like that area too. I think it does a great thing with its sort of central stairway area, and then creating these great little encounter vignettes off to the side that all kind of have their own feel to them.
Yeah.
Which is really nice. And are all spooky as heck.
Well, then it ends with the Lumen Flower, the fight, the Living Failures, which is no great shakes, and then ends with Maria, one of the greatest boss fights in the series.
Of course.
Yeah.
So it caps off really well. And Maria is very much like, even though it's a different title card, Maria is very much the boss of that area. Like that's the person those patients are talking about.
Yep.
you know, and everything like that is the that's a great area.
Yeah.
Would have been it's in my like 3 I was going to bring up. I came up with 3 for most of these, just in case anybody scoops mine. So I'm gonna do the obvious one, and Research Hall probably would have been what I would have said, but I'm gonna say Canehurst.
Yep.
You know, which is obvious. I almost went with Hemwick. Like in Revisit, like I love Hemwick Tourmaline. Like that is so good. But Canehurst is it was weird. The reason why I felt reluctant in picking it is because one of the reasons I love it is that it is a break from Bloodborne. You know, in the middle of Bloodborne. Like,
yeah, that doesn't speak too well to the whole thing.
But it's I love Bloodborne, but the contrast is so powerful.
Yeah.
You know, and the way, man, like the way you get there, like this like undead wagon takes you from finding an invitation on the surgery table you just woke up on is like wonderfully dreamlike and surreal. Turn around, having the horses be long dead.
Yep.
You know, making your way, those tick things never get fun to fight. That sucks.
Yeah.
But once you actually get into the castle, like this castle full of ghosts, kind of aesthetic hasn't been totally done. This way in a Souls game. And the thing that kind of puts it over the edge, even though wireframe, like it's very interesting, it has that mix of kind of like Dark Souls 1-esque outdoor indoor exploration. Is everything is fun to fight in it after you get inside the door.
Right.
The ghosts are fun to fight. The gargoyles are fun to fight. The mix-ups are really cool, like the compositions of encounters. You know, the guys who hit you with the dart,
like all
and
of
give
those,
you the brand,
all of those dart encounters inside the inside the dark libraries. Yeah,
that's very cool. Like, and it's not over harsh. Like you take more damage when you're branded, but it doesn't like it's not a one-shot kill. It doesn't toxic you. It doesn't stun you, so then a ghost is going to 3-shot you. Everything is kind of measured and considered in a way, and it has that ballroom where it looks like people were just eating well.
Oh yeah, if you didn't bring that up, I was going to chastise you, Gary.
like an abandoned dining hall, like from Maniac Mansion on. From Maniac Mansion on, from Great Expectations on, has that been like something that I've valued. But it looks like they're eating material goods. Like it's wonderfully weird. And the more kind of lore stirs and theories that came out about Canehurst, the less I got into it. You know, where it's like, like this is who they are. And it's like, didn't really want to know. Like, I feel like the strength of that is how weird it was.
It thrives at first blush. Yeah.
Like, and then the story that ends there. So like, to your point, Stuart, like, you know, Bloodborne doesn't have NPC stories really. I mean, it does, but they're not developed usually. But the thing with Alfred and the Queen, the Vile Bloods, is so good.
Yeah, that was actually one of my things that are great from the Souls of Glories. So
it's and then Logarius is a great fight. Like even he didn't memory leak for me. I've always fought hard Logarius, but I think he's on that side of of challenging but good. Yeah, he doesn't feel unreasonable.
Great arena as well.
Yeah. Like the snow swept, crumbling rooftop. Like, it's suitably, like, I hate the word epic, but like, that's what it is. Yeah. And, so that, I think that area has it all for me, except for those fucking ticks out in the courtyard, which are the worst. And that area I think that area is actually really poorly designed. Like, it's not just like annoying. It's like, these things overlap and they're way too harsh. There are too many of them. Like, it's cool to see them. It's a great design, but they're never fun to fight. Once you actually get into the building, it is, chef fingers to the end.
I love that area too. I do have a slight ethereal bone to pick with the Banshees, and they're stunning you so everyone can knife you in the gut a bunch of times. That gets a little old for me, but otherwise, yes, it is just an astounding area. And eating and them like maybe consuming gold and silverware is so evocative. I have definitely put it in a D&D game or two.
Nice. So let's look on the other side of this coin. Stuart, what's your least favorite area or the worst area in the game?
I thought at first that I might just say Chalice Dungeons and then go and but to be actually fair, I think I dislike the Nightmare Frontier the most. I think it's got some cool stuff in it. It's got some cool stuff, and it was a super neat thing to find the first time I got there. And I like the boss all right, but going up against the oh god, what are they called? The dull like things.
Winter Lanterns.
Winter Lanterns, yes. Oh god, that was awful the first time. I like Patches as much as anybody, but him kicking me into a river full of poison and nonsense is not okay. Having to deal with a couple hunter fights at once there is pretty awful, and none of it matters.
Nope.
Like at the end of it, you get a chalice, and wow, no. I don't care.
There's nothing that the Nightmare Frontier says that the Nightmare of Mensis doesn't say better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Nightmare of Mensis has its own problems. But it matters a lot more, and it's got a lot more variety of what it's doing, whereas the Nightmare Frontier it really hits that visual clutter in a bad spot.
It's really monochromatic too.
Yeah.
Like it's a real blah looking zone.
And you know, there might come a point where I've had enough of running through a poison swamp.
Yeah.
You can do it in every game. I get it, but like, oof.
Yeah, this has other complicating factors stacked on top of it that are not great.
Yeah,
that's a really good answer.
Yeah. Is it okay if I pile on that as well? Because I was going to make the visual design side of it. There's no area in the game that I think is less successful than the Nightmare Frontier, other than what I know Gary is going to say.
Well, I can't say chalices because I consider that not part of the game.
Same, and yeah. I actually left those out of it. No, I know you're going to say Yahar'gul Chapel.
Yeah.
And you know, just the whole second visit to that. No, I'm going to go with you, Stuart. Let's team up and just say like just the visual design of the Nightmare Frontier and just the overall encounter kind of space that they put you into. No, I have no room or patience or time for it. And like I dipped into it, died a couple of times to a Winter Lantern on my recent playthrough, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go and skip this. It's fine. I like Amygdala as a fight as well, but it's not worth getting to, specifically because there's nothing on the back of it.
Yeah,
I like it, and this is a thing that got kind of deep because I like this game a lot, and I actually wrote a couple essays on it a while ago on its relationship to dreams and things like that. Very dry and boring to read overall, but I really like the Nightmare Frontier as it stands as a representation of sort of the divergent paths taken from Byrgenwerth. So we have like the lecture hall, and there are two exits from it, and one goes to the Nightmare Frontier and one goes to the Nightmare of Mensis. And to me, those kind of spoke to the different attitudes of the people who remained at Byrgenwerth and the people who split off to create the School of Mensis and the Healing Church and that kind of thing. And the aimless maze-like nonsense of the Nightmare Frontier contributed pretty heavily to that, which is good, but does not make for a good level.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Anyway.
Yeah. I also do not like those zones for the same, or that zone for the same reason. And Amygdala is fine. Like Amygdala looks cool, but like any fight that doesn't fit on your camera, like in Souls, is going to be a little bit tricky. And then there's Defiled Amygdala, which is a literal travesty. But yeah, I'm going to say Yahar'gul for reasons I mostly mentioned earlier, which is that it is overly hostile, and like hostile's good. I get that, but that kind of like I just need to run through this and not engage with it. Black Gulch is as long as I want that to be.
Yes.
And Yahar'gul goes on forever. And like, are you shitting me with that three hunter at one time fight? Like, is anyone supposed to, like, every time I was on Twitter and I was complaining about Yahar'gul when I was playing it, and I said like, who can defend that? And everyone's defense of it were weird ways you could cheese it. And it underlined
the
essential
is not good.
Yes. Yeah, the lesson I've learned from Bonfireside Chat and game design is that being able to complete something does not make it good. And like it's such a harsh, shitty thing, and it's they crush that lantern that's right before it. They smash the lantern that's there when you first get kidnapped for no reason other than hatred. There's weird shortcuts that are these fountain teleportation things that are kind of nonsensical. The shortcuts are not very good. Like if you take a wireframe of it, the area doesn't make a lot of sense and does not feel lived in and good in the way, like it's part of that city, which is cool. They sculpted people climbing up the walls to get out, which is really haunting and awesome.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel like a place at all.
Right.
Like it does a really bad job of feeling like part of the city to me. When you, and it's weird because when you first go there and it's kind of empty and they're just jailers wandering around and you're kind of confined to that jail, it does.
Oh, it's so good because you feel so trapped.
Yeah, it feels a lot better. And you are trapped. Like it's a jail. That's where they put people. Going out on the street though, like does not feel like a street. It doesn't feel like a place where anyone could live. And it is just so annoyingly harsh. And then the boss at the end, the one reborn, which is like one of the least significant bosses in the game, I think.
Yeah.
And just like you've done like the big pile of corpses, like enough, I think. Souls, like, it has just been done. So like, and it's the same thing mechanically as the Tower Knight fight. Like you've done this, every part of this many times over. Like this is not particularly cool. The only cool part to me is that, the statue's trying to climb up the walls and then finding Evil Ash and getting sucked into the Nightmare of Mensis at the end.
Yeah.
The people strapped to chairs with the cages on their head are very neat, but that's fewer and far between than I really would like it to be.
Right.
Yeah.
So, what do you got for best boss, Stuart?
I worry this might take you off because I know you had a tough time with her the first time, but I really like Vicar Amelia.
Oh, wow.
I mean, there are lots and lots of bosses I like a lot, and I figured, that you guys would cover the ones that people from who listen to the podcast will expect. But Vicar Amelia, the first time I was going through the game, was where I really got in the zone and I understood how the game worked, and I got into that elegant dance that the combat can be. And I didn't have a problem with her like healing or anything like that. And I love the little scene of her transforming, how it's off camera but still scary as heck. And there's that nice Easter egg where people have cut out the audio and heard the exact prayer that she's making there, which revealed a lot of neat stuff. And the arena is just nice and wide and open for that kind of fight, and I'm not going to get screwed over by a loose pebble or something like that on the ground.
Yeah.
So I think that's mostly what hit it.
Like I think Amelia is actually like not a bad fight. I think my issue in revisiting is where you run into her. Like I think she's a little bit too can be fought a little bit too early. If you go do both the optional areas before her, she's not too harsh. But my frustration with her came from like thinking that was the critical path, as opposed to going to our old Yarhagul or Hemwick.
In my first playthrough, I did not do Old Yarnum or Hemwick until after I had beat Rom.
Okay.
Yeah,
I just hadn't found either of those areas, and I was like, oh, what's all this? So, and she was hard. Like Vicar Amelia was very hard, but yeah.
It's just I couldn't outpace her healing.
Yeah.
But I have no. She's not like on my bottom. She's not on my bottom list. Like I don't hate that boss or anything.
Yeah. She's certainly like the story stuff, even around her. Like she is that kind of linchpin around the some of the early reveals, right? Like that is the point where you find the skull and you touch it and you get your first kind of glimpse of oh god, what's his name, Gary? Jimmy McSmartpants.
Jimmy McSmartpants.
Yeah, Jimmy McSmartpants. He went to college and he pointed at the moon.
Yeah, Lawrence and Willem. Thank you.
There we go.
Lawrence
Thank you.
Willem.
Yeah.
one of the best cutscenes in the series.
Yeah.
And actually it's about people being alive and in the world. It's not like, a narrator telling you about ancient gods. Like it's actually just two people having a conversation. Like I love that cutscene.
Yeah.
You get it from a skull. I'm going to go ahead and scoop and switch our orders.
Okay.
On this and take this just so I can say something first if it ends up being your favorite as well.
Yeah, you're probably going to grab it. So
maybe it depends. So my favorite's Maria.
Yep.
And this, I think this is this is a controversial statement. I think this is the only time From has been entirely successful in doing a 3-phase boss fight, and easily one of the best, if not the best, multi-phase. Like there are other multi-phase ones that are successful. I think it's rare, and I think 3-phase boss fights don't work except for Maria. And I think the reason why Maria works is because her attacks all build off of each other. She doesn't get totally new verbs. Her health doesn't refill. She just does a little bit more range, is a little bit more aggressive, and it kind of has this natural progression. The cutscene where you run into her is also up there in the pantheon of great Souls cutscenes.
Yeah.
She's a great character.
Yep.
And the DLC being kind of about her and being about her and Gurman, and this kind of original sin of the college is like really thematically whole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's not overtly like, you can parry her. She's not like, a crazy challenge boss. She is just like, it is a very, very fun duel. It's the Bloodborne equivalent of Artorias.
Yes.
To me.
Yes.
Yeah. And and fashion on point.
fashion so on point.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, they're making dolls of her. Come on.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I do love what that says about Gehrman and how much of a gross creep he is.
Yep.
And you put that together.
Yeah, just her role as kind of the central figure in the story, who is so important yet wasn't really alluded to that much in the main game. I think that just her presence builds up that DLC in such a way, like so much about that feels additive. I'm kind of annoyed that there was another explanation for the presence of the bad blood and the curse, but like everything related to Maria on a personal level is amazing, and her fight I think is pretty fucking unassailable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. For all the reasons, Gary, that you said. Yeah. Maria was definitely my choice for that. My backup would have been Gehrman as well. I think that Gehrman's fight is a really, really good final boss fight for the game. Moon Presence is kind of a wet fart. And I don't really like the ending that you get on the back of that anyway. So, if you look at Gehrman as the highest test of this, fast moving, dual style play that the game has been trying to teach you off and on, Gehrman is a really good kind of test for that. And yeah, I think that is a lot of the place where a lot of the kind of fight where Bloodborne excels.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
they're very similar fights actually in like a lot of ways.
Yes.
And as far as like similar amounts of mobility and everything, being able to stagger you, parry you the same way and stuff, makes sense narratively too.
Yeah.
Maybe. Who sucks, Stuart?
I also wanted to be a little non-obvious with this because there are plenty of bosses that kind of suck, but for me, it's actually the Witch of Hemwick.
Ooh.
I like her concept.
Let's fight.
I like her concept a lot. I love the area. I just kind of hate how it always plays out for me. And I don't know if this was just personally, but like I always have to attempt it many times, and I always lose track of where she is. She catches me, digs my eyes out every time. And I find it first so frustrating because I always feel like I have to do it, even though it's kind of optional, because I feel like I have to have the runes equipped. And if I don't, I'm somehow not playing optimally enough, even though I'm not big into like min-maxing my character perfectly.
Yeah.
So, well, the runes are huge. Like cutting off that system behind an area at all is kind of a questionable decision. You don't get rings. Like, what the fuck?
And I think it's great that they, checked the box of like scary old witch from the, gothic horror setup. But it's just painful every time I fight it, and I'm for some reason still so tense every time I do it, even though I can like, go through the Blood-Starved Beast or Gascoigne and just be like, yeah, whatever, I'm fine, I'm doing this. Yeah, parry here, whatever. But that witch, and then the second one, anyway, they just kind of hit me right in that rage place.
Yeah.
I don't actually want to fight.
No, I can see that. It definitely is a gimmick fight, and those live or die depending on the strength of those gimmicks. Like it can feel that fight, depending on the role, depending on where she spawns, depending on any number of factors, does feel like it can take way longer than it ought to. And I think that is a reasonable point of frustration.
It's funny because I haven't really heard people dislike that fight for that reason. Usually when people dislike it, I think they dislike it because they think it's too easy. I'm not saying that to like no
Yeah.
gamer out on you. When people complain about it. Yeah, I'm not trying to good you. But when people complain about it, they complain about it because of that. Usually they're like, oh, like it's too simple, things like that, which is not a complaint I get on board with. Like I like boss fights that are breathers.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, but I mean, again, Souls games find their weaknesses,
Yeah.
So
yeah. My least favorite, sorry, Stewart, is going to be Vicar Amelia.
That's fine.
So this is tough, right? Because, I'm not that big of a hater on Rom. I like the Miko Lash fight a lot. Some of these big fights that I see as being, kind of complained about at large, they kind of landed for me, or at least I can appreciate their flaws in light of the things that they add on top of it. And Amelia might as well just be a stand-in for the Cleric Beast, or for Ludwig, or Lawrence, any of these beast fights. Parl, I don't think end up working because of that visual clutter kind of stuff. And I know that tends to irritate people when we say it, but like, I cannot read them. And I think they're far too aggressive, far too shock and awe. And specifically with the Cleric Beast being semi-optional, but you don't know that. And with Vicar Amelia, being this choking point for, every single playthrough, or at least, like you have to go through her and you have to experience what it's like to fight a gigantic beast that can't fit on your camera in Bloodborne. I think that is a place where just in general, the entire game is not on its best foot. And I understand that that's ridiculous because that is the foot that it leads with. And it is the foot that they fake you out with, is that you are fighting these gigantic beasts, that these beasts, what once were men, So I think that Amelia stands out among those because she is mandatory and because of the healing kind of factor to it, even in the face of the huge lore implications that happen around her. I think that like she sticks out as like being emblematic of something that I really wish was better about this, which was the beast fights.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see how that's a problem there. I guess for me, a lot of it was whenever I am about to fight Vicar Amelia, I'm kind of like excited.
Oh yeah,
which is a little weird. Like it's not always that situation with various bosses, but with Amelia, for some reason, I'm always just like, yes, this is where I'm going to feel super cool.
Yeah,
I'm going to feel awesome doing this. So
yeah, she's a gatekeeper for a lot of cool stuff in the game.
Yeah. And given that like Chalice dungeons are their own kind of quarantined area.
Yes.
Right. Because it's like defiled watchdog, defiled amygdala are very bad. But I'm going to say Rom, not just because of Chalice Rom, which I think is worse, but I'm going to say Rom.
Yep.
I feel like most, like the common thread of people, and I'm not saying this because I know you don't really have a problem with Rom, Kole, and I'm not saying this is because of that. I'm just saying that like a lot of people I've talked to who had a really good time with Rom, it reminds me of the 3 Hunters thing where it's like they just kind of had like an easy time with it. Like it's not like they're not things about it that they like so much. It just kind of turned out to be frictionless, and like the actual, like there are elements of the fight I feel like are indefensible. Like even the people who I know who like it, like I don't think they like the like sky meteors that are incredibly hard to dodge and he can just kind of do. Like that's not a cool attack. That's not a good, like a well-designed attack. Like maybe it didn't have that big of an effect.
Yeah.
And that's perfectly valid. Like play experience is valid, of course. But it's I haven't read a cogent defense of the actual mechanics of that boss fight. The way it's, I get what it's going for, this kind of keep away thing. Like Rom doesn't want you next to him, so he's going to do things to stop you from being next to him. But it is where that the way that damage can kind of stack up, like if you get tagged with anything and another spider anywhere in your periphery happen to do one of those dive bombs, that's a death.
Yeah. Like
100 times out of 100. He doesn't do that sky meteor thing when you're close, but he can start it when you're far away, and then it can proc when you're close. So if you use that to kind of run in, or if you happen to be moving to dodge, you get closer. When that interacts with the spiders, that's a death. That does 60% of your health, and a spider can stun you or do that dive bomb, which does so much of your health. There, clearing out the spiders is tedious. Ignoring the spiders is fine, but risky. And it just like the times I won against Rom, it always just felt like, oh, that time the spiders just happened to hang back and it was chance. Like I never feel like I learned it. I always just felt like those set of circumstances that resulted in like an instant death just didn't happen to happen.
Yeah.
Through die rolls, know, and his attacks that he does when you get close to him as well are not particularly fun because they're not like, you really dodge them. Like he has that AoE next to him. He has the thing that he shoots the ice spikes out of the ground. You can dodge the ice spikes. He only does that at mid range. He doesn't do it when you're close, and you have to be close. Like one of the most heartbreaking things about this is I went in with the bow blade thinking like, oh, I'm going to be able to fight Rom really easily because I don't have to get close to him. He pivots on this perfect pin to have his face facing you all the time. He doesn't have to move. He just kind of, circles around. So he's always armored.
Yeah.
From a ranged attack, which makes, as a fuck you to any other attempt at another kind of build. I couldn't buff my weapon, so I couldn't do lightning damage, which is his big weakness because the Tauntauss like chews him up. I don't want there to be like, well, just use Kukris. Just use Kukris is never a good answer to a fight. There's a, and that's what it feels like to me is like the times I beat it, I just lucked out and some bad things didn't happen. And then the key, like one of the keys to make it easier is something that I don't want to have be the only key to making it easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I only liked it because it was frictionless, because it definitely wasn't frictionless. I think that there definitely was a die roll kind of element to that, or an RNG, like you said, sometimes you just get lucky. That good experience let me actually like fixate and really notice the two things that really worked about it for me, which were kind of the football element of dodging around those miniature spiders and the arena as well. I think that the arena that you fight in is a huge credit to that fight in a way that does, both of those things being cool and things that I appreciate, they do not obviate those problems that you brought up, Gary. Like those are still really, really huge issues. And like that whole the meteor down from the top is not defensible, I don't think.
Like the thing about the arena that's interesting is that like the arena is the only way that fight works. And then when they do that in the Chalice dungeon, it's excruciating.
Yeah.
Because then you have a limited play space and you have things you can get caught up on, and it just sucks.
Yep.
Like they had to make that arena a huge featureless plane, like pretty much like the Four Kings arena, because anything else wouldn't work.
Right.
Like it just feels like there's just not I don't like the idea to it. I think that there's ways to do the good parts that you're talking about, that kind of like dodging through the spiders kind of thing. But it's like I almost wish that like, one element had been told, like if you could fight the spiders from the front, so I could go in there and each one didn't have to be this kind of careful circle around to kill it if it was in my way.
Yeah.
Or if it didn't have that dive attack that breaks your lock on and goes off the camera.
No, that's fucking terrible.
Like there's just those little elements like that I just think are just like, this is just really bad design.
It just gets in the way.
And it sucks because I love it so much from a lore perspective. I love the cutscene afterwards. It's the fulcrum from which the game turns weird. In a total way. Like it's great in everything except for the fight.
Yeah.
And it bums me out because even from the, they start hinting at the spider really early on. And I'm like, yes, like that sounds cool. Like I want that so bad. And then turns out to be something I don't like the experience of on, four plays of it, revisiting several times. It's also worth noting that they added like NPC hunters to things for when you're having difficulty, and the NPC hunter for it is pretty useless. He just casts spells at Rom's helmet.
Yep, no good.
So,
I got through it this time by summoning the two Confederates you can get for it, and they both got spidered really hard, really fast.
Yeah,
and I was like, "Oh, I'm just against a stronger Rom now. Great."
It's really common. I mean, this is a repeated point that I talked about in the actual episode, but like, Bloodborne doesn't give you a way to defend against things you don't know are there.
Right.
In Dark Souls, I can hold up my shield, and if something attacks me from like a pretty wide angle, it'll bounce off my shield. Here, like it's like the fight would work from an overhead perspective.
Yeah.
Like perfectly.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. So what are Stuart? Go ahead and what are your three things? And these can be moments, NPCs, elements, tones, atmospheres, very general, that you think are absolute tops in Bloodborne.
The very opening. When you walk down into the first floor of Yosefka's clinic and you see that beast chowing down, that was terrifying for me my first time, and it was so good. And it's that kind of unrelenting, painful tutorial where it's like, no, come on, do something hard. This is no things betwixt. You gotta really prove yourself here. And it was such a good introduction to the game and just such a flavorful opening to it. The lighting on the area is perfect. The atmosphere is so good because it's medical and scary. And I love that moment so much.
The fact that it's just a spooky abandoned hospital, like, Victorian World War I era hospital. Big thumbs up on that.
And that your character just woke up from this sort of 3-part insane dream, because you've got this, okay, so some guy gave me some blood, and also here's a giant fire and blood monster or something. Maybe it died, and what are these tiny little white things? And then the game's like, go. And you just have to kind of go and figure stuff out. So everything has that extra weight to it. And I'm really glad they didn't start you off fighting one of the generic Yarnamites or something like that.
Yeah.
Who, if you had any experience with the series coming in, you might have been able to actually just beat to death with your hands, which would have been such an early anticlimax.
Yeah.
Game.
What? Let's do all 3 of them.
Yeah.
In each go.
My second one is I love Annalise's punishment. I think in a game where they reference sight all the time, locking her in an invisible tower and putting a mask with a blindfold on her is really flavorful and really cool.
Yeah.
I like that they're like, well, we can't kill you, so we're going to make you disappear. And this is a really in flavor and thematic way to make that happen. Mm-hmm. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah.
She's surrounded by statues of people.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
She has a court of statues.
And the tower itself, and like, I tend to play this game as though I am like a lost child of Canehurst coming home, because I love that aesthetic and that story so much. And I know it's a bit outside of the story of the rest of the game, but so good in there.
We're going to be coming back to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And my last one is, I really think that the dialogue in this game is probably the strongest it is thematically in the games, because I find it really interesting how people talk about blood and talk about sight as being important things, like what you see, but almost every character refers to you by your smell.
Yeah.
So like they call you moon-scented hunter and stuff like that. And there's only one character I found in the dialogue who actually refers to you by sight, and it's original OG Yosefka. And she says she hopes she can see you when the sun rises and the hunt is over, which she doesn't get that far. So unfortunate for her. But yeah, I think that the dialogue has a lot of great subtleties to it that, I mean, in a game that is generally pretty sparse with dialogue, the economy of it is really impressive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I totally agree.
Yeah, with you on that. What do you got for number 3?
Oh, that was my number 3. Sorry, I was the dialogue.
Yes.
And the opening clinic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Yeah, those are. I'm with you on those. Those are all 3 things that I love.
I could do a 4 and a 5 and a 6. There's a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, it's a very good game. I'll do mine. I can rattle through them real quick. The moment when you find the real workshop, kind of hidden away in that grain silo. I just love how that plays into the dream aspect of this. How the architecture and scenery in the dreams is, based on our experience, but also in this case, it is informed by, Gehrman's own experience as a hunter and the things that he wanted to surround himself in his purgatory. Finding that and realizing that my hub is based on this real kind of dilapidated, diminished place in real life is great. And a sub point of this would be at the very end game when the workshop is on fire. As just this wonderful, striking piece of imagery to let you know that even your home base is sick and degraded, and it's about time to go. Is wonderful. So everything related to the workshop, I think, would be one of those. Number 2 would be being abducted for the first time. Again, we talked about that in the kind of the opening meander there, about how that is probably the best usage of teleporting. And also the best usage of a death, You know, you got a little bit of that in Dark Souls 1 when you died to Seath for the first time and you woke up in the tower. And how did that happen? Here, you know, dying to the strange enemy that was not there before. And then instead of just waking up at the last lamp, but going into this cutscene where you are in this entirely new, very hostile area that you're, you know, probably not leveled for, is this wonderful moment of mystery, you know. And I think that like my phrasing for this back around the time was like, oh God, it feels like the back of my head has just like opened up. Like, what else weird is going to happen in this game? And I think that is just a really tops moment for me. Even if the real version of Yahar Ghul ends up being kind of a bummer, that first visit and the way you get there is, I think, masterful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And that's also that area where that soundtrack comes in, and it's subtle, but it's like I've listened to the soundtrack for this game a bunch of times, and that one is so spooky and so perfect for that, and hints at that kind of like hints a bit at the flavor the game is going to end up going for. Mm-hmm. But it's sorry. Yes, it's good.
Yeah,
it's very good.
And my final one is the ending of Alfred's quest line.
Oh, I was like, you're gonna snake my points. No. You did not. So
cool. Okay. No, the ending of Alfred's quest line. Alfred being the solid bro who has given you so much information and has been upfront about his quest, you know, to go after these cursed vile bloods. The vile's in the name, you know, like, yes. And then you find out that not only is he
formerly vile dentistry.
Yep. Not only is he, you know, just as bloodthirsty as everybody else, he's kind of worse, because you find him in this just degraded, you know, sense of bloodlust that he's at, and having done this existential violence, grinding somebody who can never die into a paste. Like, I don't know, like just that single moment sells a lot of the terror around this entire game for me in a way that like makes that stack up with a lot of the best NPC moments across the series. Yeah, Alfred is great, and I love the way that he interacts with Annalise.
Yeah, it's also that also really stands out because it's pretty much the only one of those other that, like, you know, that's quarantined from bosses and stuff.
Yeah.
Because Eileen is fine. Mm-hmm. You know, the guy with the minigun hunter is fine. You know, there's lots of things like that are fine. That's actually like really, really, really dramatic and strong in a game that lacks that.
Yes.
You know, pretty hard. So it stands out a lot. That would have been one of mine. But you didn't snake my other one, which I was worried about. Finding the second visit to Yosefka's clinic. Finding out the fate of Yosefka and what's going on there. You know, going the reverse way through her corpse chute. And finding out that this one character who, if you're not paying attention, you know, feels like a lone kind of voice of benevolence in this really hostile world, and finding out that's not the case. And then, so that anyway that articulates. So if you come back early, and she wants to fight you, and you find out that she's making these aliens essentially, or if you come back late and she is on doggy style, going through contractions.
Yeah.
Is one of the most like weird and haunting moments in this game, and does everything that you want from that, like revisiting an earlier area feeling, kind of recontextualizing things. And that whole grander mechanic, like the sending people back to either the church or to Yosefka thing, actually really works, and I think is a cool kind of twist on the whole yurt NPC dynamic from Demon Souls, like that kind of hostile thing. It's a little bit rough, but none of the NPCs are really that valuable to you. So if you lose one, it can just be a cool narrative moment. It's not like you're killing your fucking like, oh, like this is the person who sells me spells and now they're dead. You know, like, well, that sucks. Reset.
They learned some moderation.
Yeah, they learned. You know, so it works. It works in instilling the player, but doesn't mechanically cripple you.
When you've got your dirt character too.
Yeah,
and the beggar in the Forsaken Woods, and sending him here, yurting the yurt is. I feel so great.
Giving him the old double reverse yurt.
Yeah, y'all got yurted. Go yurt. Like, you're on the go. That's a big one. This is so obvious, but the first time, so I guess I'll tie these in together. The first time you get yanked up by an invisible amygdala, and then when you later find out what they are and you see all of them, going back to the city and having it crawling with generally non-harmful eldritch monstrosities.
Yeah.
And it's an area that, like, the kind of sameness and the amount of time you spend backtracking and going through that hub really is effective, because it feels like a space like the back of your hand. And now, that happens, your insight is higher, so, like, the tall church guys are carrying eyeball lamps now, and things are subtly different, and then they get hugely different.
Yeah.
And it's just such a striking image of, like, and again, in an invasion, and it makes me wish that Nightmare Frontier had a little bit more of that sense of, like, two worlds bleeding into each other, because that's what this does.
Just that moment of reveal, like, where it's not directly stated, like, there's no way of knowing, but this is the way it always was. You can just now see it because of the moon or because of your insight. Like, hey,
it's
have
from
fun.
Beyond.
Yeah.
it's explicitly from Beyond. Yep. So these things are all there. You just didn't have the Tillinghast wave generator to stimulate your pituitary gland to make you see it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember back when this game was just coming out, Vati had a preview of it where he was running around a bit in Yharnam, and he, like, glances to the side and sees an amygdala on top of a building way in the distance, but he can't tell what it is. And so he's like, oh man, that's some giant spider or something. And so when I was going through this game, I was like, oh man, this giant spider's going to show up at some point. And, they keep mentioning the spider. And then when these guys showed up, it was just such an amazing sort of mindfuck moment.
Yeah.
That was so good.
Yeah, I didn't see that. I tend not to watch preview stuff. Like, with 2, I wanted to come into these clean. But that is awesome. Like, the idea that it almost is stronger. Like, if you don't, you think there's something there, but you don't know what it is, then you find out exactly what it is.
Yeah.
I love the way those articulate. I love the way the amygdalas work as a feature of the world and decoration way more than I like how they work as a boss fight.
Yeah.
And then finally, Mikolash's dialogue during the fight and when he dies. We talked about this at length with Scott Benson and David Plavis on that episode, but the heartbreak and the kind of it's one of the best, like, depictions in a visual medium of insanity to me, like Lovecraftian insanity explicitly.
Yes.
And just him being so, like, he's heartbroken, like, he's not murderous. He's not full of rage. Like, it's literally, you broke his heart by doing this to it. And it's such a powerful performance. It's one of my favorite Souls game performances, like, vocally.
Yeah, I'll cut that in. I'll cut in his dying line here, because that is worth doing.
Now I'm waking up. I'll forget everything.
It's really good. That is a moment that stuck with me, for sure.
I just super expected to hear the dialogue right now, because you mentioned cutting it in. I was like, oh, cool.
We're not cutting it into your brain. Like, the memory leak is in here.
I'm too lazy to set up a soundboard ahead of time. Come on.
Yeah. And finally, let's do some Bloodborne, some Blood Bummers.
Yeah. Stewart.
Trying to get Maria's weapon.
Shit.
In the DLC. That place is Kentucky Fried nonsense. It's ridiculous.
That is a hateful fucking encounter.
Can you remind me what that is?
So it's the tunnel that is, first off, full of winter lanterns.
Okay.
There's 2 of them in there, I think. And then it leads into the area where there's 2 giant fishmen.
And one of the fish ogres.
And the one of them that you just start fighting, it's like everything's okay, and then the other one drops from the goddamn ceiling.
Now I know what you're talking about. Yeah, get in the Rockio. Yeah.
And I have no pride in this. I cheese the crap out of them every time.
Hey man, catch as catch can.
Yeah, never ever going to fight that legit, because it's ridiculous, and it's part of the problem with the DLC, where it is a pretty late game area, but, like, I might want to do a build with these weapons, and I kind of have to start on that early.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, it's a neat weapon, and it's a great, like, I like the fishing hamlet overall, but that encounter is just the worst.
Very bad. What is your second bummer?
Yeah, so my other one is probably those 3 hunters in Yahar'gul. And I just fought them yesterday, and it was awful. And I beat them on my first try, and it's not about like getting good or it being too hard or anything. It's just not fun. Mm-hmm. The little guy with the claws just always dodges around you, trying to keep you out of keep you focused on him while the other guy's blasting a cannon at you, and it's just too much from too many angles in a way that isn't interesting. It's just it's got that kind of roll of the dice quality that ROM had for you, Gary, because like if I have my back turned on a guy and he hits me with a cannon, I am dead. And there's no way in heck I'm getting out of that. So that moment is just awful.
Yeah.
Like having a character with a cannon can be kind of interesting because it's a very high consequence. Like, it kind of goes slow, it has a wind up, but you can't be expected to keep your eye on that while you fight 2 other fuckers.
I think I remember I was listening to Abject Suffering at the same time, and you guys had just covered Circus Charlie. And when I went through there, I was like, "Oh, this is what Circus Charlies are." I get it now. That just worked perfectly for me.
Yeah, anyway. It's a really, really bad encounter, and I have no idea how it got in the game.
No, and also like one of the main goals in going to Yahar'gul the first time is to open up that shortcut so you don't have to run past them and aggro them. Like, after I tracked myself with them that first time, it's like, nope, I'm never going to do this again. So
it sucks though. They have an insanely large leash. So this time I was trying not to fight them and run past them, and they follow you for a long time into the fucking death streets full of the corpse cards. So it's not like you can like run. There's anywhere to run. It is insanely intense.
Yeah.
There. I'm going to work on, I feel like Cole's going to say both of mine. So I'm going to work on backups.
we're just fighting over scraps. I've got backups, don't worry.
But just know that, I'm going to let you go, but just know that assuming the ones you say are the ones I think you're going to, that I support you 100%.
Yes. First and foremost, man, that blood vial system. It's the worst thing about this game. Oh my god, how many times I ran through Hemwick Charnel Lane from the witch's abode just to get them to drop, and then spending levels and levels worth of blood echoes to get blood vials, and the fact that they get more expensive as they go. Yeah. Like I can see what they were trying to do, which is, hey, you have an ability to, in the heat of the moment, recover this health, using the regain system. But as we talked about, that gets slowly chipped away and eroded. So like I can understand them maybe saying, oh, rely on this other system as opposed to just a constant reliable stream of, respawning or replenishing healing items. But that stream of replenishing healing items is one of the things about that is successful about Dark Souls, and that all of the successful Souls-likes have taken. So what this meant was every couple of hours I would have to go do a chore to stock up a couple hundred of these so I could go about just fighting bosses.
It definitely doesn't improve on replay either.
Nope.
Like if you're doing it the second time, like the first time I had to do it, I was like, oh, this sucks, but it's probably because I'm bad at it. And then when I went back on this replay and had to go grind, I was like, dude, like I'm a grown ass fucking man. like you're really going to ask 36-year-old fucking me to do this? Like, are you kidding me? Like it is bad. And a lot of people will say like, oh, like they made it so you can store 999. That just means you can grind in bigger chunks. It doesn't mean you have to grind less though. It just means you can get more of it out of the way. So if you feel like literally killing a fucking Saturday, like you could take care of this problem, but like this flaw is not worth a Saturday.
No, you know? Yeah. And it's a Souls game. You're going to take damage. I don't care how much you want to get good me on the back of this. No, you're going to take damage and you're going to want to recover it. Like this is a problem that everybody is going to run into, and farming is just a way to get around constantly scraping by and guttering, with less than a full stock. It is unacceptable, and I think inexcusable.
It's got this weird paradox to it as well, where if you're really good at the early parts of the game, you're not going to even have as big of a stock of blood vials later. because you haven't gone through the streets of Yharnam that many times where they drop them like crazy or something like that. And it's just
you're right. You're totally right, because it ends up being, as you go through Yharnam a bunch of times, it's like you use blood vials, but if you're bad at it, you're doing like 4 steps forward, 2 steps back.
Right.
Like, they drop them like crazy, and you use a couple of them every time, but you're still making gains. And if like this last time I went through it, like the streets of Yharnam were not a big deal, so like I didn't have the stockpile. And then just like that sinking feeling the first time you die and respawn and you have less than full.
Why are those numbers white? Why are those numbers white?
11? Like 11? 11?
I thought the good times would never end.
Yeah. Man.
And my second blood bummer is the relative dearth of good NPCs. So I think that they're definitely there. Like we said, Eileen, Alfred is a real standout. And there are good moments. There's some very good dialogue in this, but like this is something that I'm feeling, that I have felt very sorely since Dark Souls 2, but it definitely feels very sore here because they had a chance to restart with good NPC quest lines that would support that were supported by the theme and the aesthetic, but they just kind of didn't. Which is a real bummer for me. It feels like a missed opportunity, especially because this world does feel so lived in, and so vibrant, and to not have that really bear out is a real bummer for me.
And there's a whole stock of like Lovecraftian NPCs that have been really cool.
Yep.
Kind of tropes.
Yeah.
I think would have really, really helped that. So I'm glad you didn't take my other one.
Yeah.
So Health Vials would have been mine, but I had to back up. Number one is obviously Chalices.
Yep.
For reasons that we went out at length, that we don't need to do like a whole, like, let's just slot in the entire, like 4.5 hours we spent on Chalices. Right?
And make everybody mad again.
Yeah. I still, everything I not like them more.
Yep.
Nothing has changed. I still think they are bad. And the only people who like them, like, it's either you go real deep into the random ones, and every once in a while you get something weird, like a boss wandering around outside the level, which is cool. But you had to put in a lot of work for it. Yharnam is a great boss fight, like, but you had to put in, it's just not worth what you had to put in for it.
Right.
And that's how I feel about Chalices in general. And like, it's just not worth it.
I'm happy they didn't pursue that in Dark Souls 3.
Oh, thank God. It seemed extremely bad. I was so excited for it. I wanted Souls Binding of Isaac.
Yep. And
it turned out I don't want that. Like the finiteness is a strength. That's something I want from this game. Lit a Die kind of taught me that too. Like these kind of games, like it's incompatible to me with like a roguelike unlimited structure. And then the other thing I'm going to say is, and this is really obvious, but lack of build variety. Kills a lot for this game on replay. Like Dark Souls 3, like I played 3 times and never want to touch it again. Bloodborne, I still feel really good about it, but this 4th time I went through it might be the last time for a really long time, because every playthrough ends up being roughly the same. And when the game gets kind of like harsh in level design, I don't have that kind of like the end game. When it gets a little bit like harder, but then also a little bit more hostile and a little bit worse up until the DLC, I think. I don't have like a large variety to carry me forward. It's not like, there's none of that feeling of like the first time I played through Dark Souls 1 as a sorcerer, and I was like, this feels entirely different. Bosses that were easy are now hard. Bosses that were hard were now easy. Like this feels like a whole new game. I think emphasizing that variety can give you a lot of kind of replay value and make your game a lot richer, and that's not a value that Bloodborne has.
Right.
It just doesn't want to do that, and the kind of feints towards that end up actually being detrimental, because it would almost be better if there weren't spells at all.
Yep.
They're meant to be these little like, oh, you just kind of use this to complement your melee style because everyone's a melee player. They're not even worth the investment. Like it makes your melee significantly worse for like almost no gains, without kind of greater more kind of min-maxing than I want to do. So
100%.
That bums me out. It just makes it. This is one of my favorite. Like I love this game.
Yep.
Like I love this game. This is really high up there in like my Souls rankings. Like it's it's tied for 2, if not 2. With like probably with like Demon Souls. Like now that I'm sitting on it for a little while, I love it.
Yeah.
But I don't don't want to replay it again and again and again just because every time is going to be the same.
Yeah.
And I've never been a New Game Plus guy. I'm always like try a new build guy.
Yeah.
You know?
No disagreement here.
Can I throw in one last thing, actually, that I found a bit of a bummer?
Yeah.
I was so excited for it. Insight.
But I thought you were going to say on Fireside Chat. Well, shit. Why would we say okay?
Yeah.
Elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm wearing my Traps and Snakes shirt right now.
Oh,
thank you.
No, so Insight, like, I thought had a lot of promise and is thematically appropriate, but is just bad.
Yeah.
Like, it just the positive things it does are just not strong enough in comparison to, like, Frenzy being a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Something like that. So I just wanted to toss that in as well because...
Didn't even talk about Frenzy this whole time.
That was one of mine, but I swapped it out for NPCs because I thought somebody else was going to take it.
Yeah, it was on my backup too, but just know it's not very good. Yeah. I agree with you about that Insight thing, but the interesting thing is the way they try to make Insight worthwhile is by turning it into a currency, which makes it like an economy, but the things that you buy with it are not worth buying really. You know, it turned out to be the problem for me. Like I had all this Insight, I had an incentive to spend it so I would be safe against Frenzy, but the things I bought it were like, you know, if you're a completionist, if you just want to own all the armor, like great. But I got, you know, my faction souls kind of unlocked pretty early in Bloodborne. Like I liked my outfit. You know, I'm not a collector in these games. Like I don't feel the need to own everything. So if you don't, you know, it could have been an interesting thing, which like you get kind of exposure to these dark secrets, but you can spend it for clothes, which I guess isn't not particularly like Lovecraftian or thematically sound. But yeah, I agree that the potential is not quite realized.
And like in that Lovecraftian flavor, like you can't spend your Lovecraftian knowledge. It is purposefully harmful to you. It's a bad thing. And having this shop there is just like, oh, the thing I should do as a player is like spend all the insight I can.
Yeah.
And because like everything it adds to the game just screws me over. Whereas I think they could have done a lot more interesting stuff, like, and I mean, it would have been a lot of work on From's part. I'm not trying to say that like, you know, deadlines are a thing, but having a lot more thresholds of change with your insight level, I think would have helped the flavor of the game a lot and would have made that mechanic a lot more worthwhile.
Yeah, I agree. When it shows up, I think it's very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, oh, like this pig is just made of eyeballs now. Like, I think that's very cool. It doesn't come up enough.
Yeah.
So I agree. And that's what we got in the notes. This has been like, I think this has been pretty fun. Yeah. I hope that people enjoyed listening to it. Stuart, was this fun? Did you have fun?
Yeah. I've had a good time. You know, being nervous notwithstanding. Hoping to do right by the listeners by Bonfireside Chat.
You've done great.
You did great.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate being on. I mean, I know, I kind of paid for the privilege, but thank you for letting me pay for the privilege.
I was going to say, it's ridiculous that you're thanking us.
No, I mean, like when I saw that tier on your Patreon, I was like, oh, I'm getting that, and I like snapped it up immediately. And oh man, and this has been really cool.
In a very real way, like we wouldn't be able to do the show as well or completely as we do without like that support. I know we say that a lot, and it's cliche, but it's definitely true. Where the it takes a lot of time, to do what we do, and we have to be able to justify spending that time rather than going out and getting real jobs.
Yeah.
That's not fair. Kole has a real job.
I mean, real.
but you know, it's allows us to spend, you know, more than a full-time job.
Yeah.
On pod stuff, which is I'm really happy to do it. I'm very lucky, and it's because of support from people like you, Stuart. I really do appreciate it. Yeah. We and I'm saying this like we're saying bye to you. We still have more to record, which will come out next week. So this is what these look like for everyone listening. Thank you very much for listening. Thanks again for just kind of the general being on board with us.
Yeah.
For this, and we have you know, your responses, people who kind of are submitting prompts. So next week we'll have the first of those.
Yep.
Bonfire Side Chat After Dark episodes, and then 3 more of these revisits for the end of the show.
Yeah. I feel like that's the majority of the business about these. Thank you so much to everybody who has supported us. If you want to continue doing that, yes, we have the Patreon, and we have redesigned that. I think by the time this comes out, or between this episode and the next one, that will have taken effect. Go to patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv to see the new things that are on offer. We're very excited about that. We think there's some cool stuff on there, including better early access, extra episodes of Abject Suffering, all of that good stuff. But I think most of all, if you're listening to this and saying, I like Bonfire Side Chat, but I'm sad that it's going away, please go to Duckfeed.tv and check out the other shows that we have on the network. Now is the time, more than ever, where we want people who like Bonfire Side Chat but haven't given the other stuff a shot to give the other stuff a shot. So if you have it in you to give us the time to look at something like Watch Out for Fireballs or Abject Suffering, we would really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, you don't owe us anything.
No,
like obviously, and there are people who out there who like they just like Dark Souls, so they're just gonna like this, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But you know, if anything, if you liked what we do, the one thing that you could do as a favor to us is at least check it out.
Yep.
You know, I think that there's a lot of crossover, and I think that the people who like this show will like that as well.
Yeah.
That's my sorry, my artificial pancreas just is acting up. So the patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv.
My
boy is sick.
Pancreas. My boy is sick.
Get me to the pancreas milestone. So I can pass my milestones for my pancreas. But yeah, we'd really appreciate that. And then, you know, the show is not going anywhere as far as on the feed, so ratings, reviews, and everything are still very useful.
Yeah.
So please do those things. Stuart, thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much, both of you.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
This has been really cool.
Yeah, I'm really glad. It's not over yet, baby. So until next time, Kole, what should they do?
They should fear the old blood.
Fucking Bassa.
Umbasa.
Umbasa.
And we all pray that we will have far more soon